You may be busy doing something while you listen to this podcast, but you're never too busy to eat healthy if you eat Vite Ramen. This podcast is sponsored by Vite Ramen. Show support for a sponsor that supports Moore's Law is Dead at the link in the description, and if you do, make sure you use offer code BROKENSILICON. And you can also support Moore's Law is Dead if you need Windows keys or software at cdkeyoffer.com. If you go there, also use the code BROKENSILICON for 25% off Windows keys or die shrink for 3% off everything else on the website. All right, now let's get on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined in person by my co-host,
Dan.
How's it going, Dan?
Pretty good. I just decided I would pop here quickly to record the podcast, then pop back over to Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's really becoming a drag on the podcast funds, flying you to Nashville to sit next to me for every episode, but we feel like you can't get the full experience. There's something lost when it's not in person.
Yeah, and a little thing people don't know is usually we're just pretending I'm in my apartment. I'm actually like just off camera right over there.
Well, what we do is we have you lay down behind this table.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dan's here in person. You know, he wanted to visit Reese right now while she's undergoing chemotherapy. We thought we'd see a comedian, laugh it up today. And yesterday. Hopefully all 3 days you're here. But all right. So actually, we do have a couple of interesting opening reader mails here. So let's see.
An Almond Breeze
box. Right. Yeah, this is actually from a different person. These are two different reader mails.
Oh, okay.
And this one I thought was very interesting. It comes from Boston, but I won't say anything else about who it came from. And he says, "Hi, Tom. You were puzzled by the codename Stones. Here is your decoder ring. Cores have names. Zen 1 and 2 are Zeppelin. Zen 3 is Starship. Zen 4 is Stones. So what we came up with is Led Zeppelin, Jefferson Starship, Rolling Stones. I'm not sure what Zen 5 is, though, as I don't work there anymore. Mix a core with an interconnect to get the product. Just a retired fan." I did not notice that, but I looked into it, and I'm like, I guess it's plausible that's what AMD could have been doing, but that is funny.
My prediction is Clearwater, then.
Well, but I have Braithorn.
Oh, I
remember for Zen 5. Yeah, Zen 5. So, I don't know. Then again, they are moving to mythical birds for APUs now, so it's entirely plausible that they were doing like classic rock bands and then they moved over to something else.
You know, somebody gets bored and they need to come up with a new clever naming scheme, so.
It just feels like every time AMD is changing naming schemes, it's not after they've exhausted. Like, they're kind of running out of the big Italian cities at this point, in my opinion, a little bit after Venice. But I mean, really, again, we were talking about this last night with APUs. They didn't make a DaVinci APU?
Yeah, I know. I mean, you know, there's only so many they can go to before they start exhausting, like, the big names. I mean, there's practically an endless well of names you can go to. But Italian cities, I feel like, I think you can get like 20 names in there before it starts being like, all right, man.
Even Bergamo is like getting a little bit into the 120 to 200,000 people range where you're like...
Still don't have a Florence, though, do we?
No Florence.
But no Florence.
Yeah. All right. Now, this one, I think you're going to get a kick out of, Dan.
Is it another thing that's just low-key roasting me? Or it's
from the person that was low-key roasting you. So, yes, the guy, the try-hard from before is back. Can you tell everybody what is inside of this box?
It is a lot of plastic spatulas.
So someone sent us just a box of spatulas, which is insane. And I think right away you can guess who this probably is. But what else do we have in here? Oh, and he even gave us a vase to put them in so we can have them in the background. Actually, I probably am going to do that now. Not while we're recording, but yeah, I might actually just have a thing of spatulas behind me moving forward.
You should just have one of your graphics cards hiding behind it, too, to really reproduce Jensen's glory.
I should start every review with a bunch of I should have B-roll of every graphics card I review. You know, when I take out my camera and start doing, like, I should have, like, there always needs to be a shot where it's next to a bunch of spatulas.
And then you need to get a leather coat.
Tom, the updates and information you've been able to provide about Lovelace's GPU development cycle have been fascinating, but something that just seemed off each time you discussed it. And then, while you and Dan were discussing the BRK, the Big Reveal Kitchen, because we're always saying that, abbreviated, for the upcoming BF GPUs and Broken Silicon 164, Eureka. Well, you may not have $1 million kitchen for your final Lovelace reveal. At least you can be king of the spatulas during your video. Live long and prosper. It's got a little... Who's that again?
Oh.
I'm blanking.
Spock.
Spock. Got a little... There, I can hold it up. Well.
Probably not. I don't know. Maybe.
You can show this. Show Spock there. And yes, this again comes from Sarcastro, the one who sent you several mails because he had to remail it because it was USPS rejected it once. And then almanac and a map of the U.S. when you said you got stuck in traffic. So yes, this is the same person,
okay.
Dan.
Well, that tracks.
If we get something goofy and snarky, we know it's Sarcastro. If we get a bunch of snacks, we know it's Benny Berlin.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, each have their pluses. Benny Berlin is very good at picking snacks, though.
Sarcastro, you did good with this one. This is very funny. I think I'm going to have a bunch of spatulas in the background from now on. But let us move forward with some reader mails from the script today. Spectrum Neo writes in, and he says, with Intel having made their down GPUs, how will Userbenchmark make Intel the highest score over Nvidia once Alchemist has entirely launched? Will everyone all of a sudden be a major content creator once the drivers are fixed and Alchemist performs faster than their iGPUs for encoding, that is? I think that is what the special iGPU feature is, beating their own iGPU in encoding finally.
I think I'm going to say lowest reported frame time in an entire benchmark is how they'll report their scores, because with that high frame variance, probably going to have at least one low frame time.
Yeah, I mean, joking aside, I think this is an impossible task for Userbench to try to say something, but in favor of Alchemist, outside of maybe they'll try to find a way to say it's better than AMD at least, because I think we need to be clear about what Userbench is. They don't seem to have a problem with Nvidia so much as Lisa Su killed someone in their family at some point. Like the vendetta they have against AMD, that's what it is. I'm not even sure it's pro Intel so much as hating AMD. Well,
you have to remember, Tom, the person that runs Userbenchmark's parents had cancer, and a bulldozer system was working on finding the cure for it. And
it
I think
just
that's
wasn't
why
fast enough.
It wasn't fast enough.
An FX processor couldn't get it done, and the owners of Userbench blamed AMD ever since.
Yep, that's his supervillain, or their supervillain origin story.
All right, Sarcastro writes in after sending us all these spatulas, and he says, hi, Tom and Dan. Recently, a Notebook Check article stated how Userbench has gone to war with AMD. Allegedly, an AMD 7600X and beat the 13900 engineering sample in a benchmark, and then they stomped their feet with a write-up saying that AMD is biased. And so, yeah, I'm going to skip ahead here, though. What I want to add on to the Userbench discussion, because recently in the news, there was that AMD Advanced Marketing Devices page with Userbench and stuff. I actually did do some digging on that, like, because that 7600X did seem to score higher than I expected.
Yes.
Like, I don't know that we should be so sure, based on what I'm told, that is a real thing. And so you go, so wait, why would AMD? AMD didn't. Look, it literally showed up in the bench as AMD Advanced Marketing Devices. What I've had suggested to me by two people in the industry, is they think Userbench faked the benchmark themselves so they could accuse AMD of faking a benchmark. That's what my sources have told me on this.
You know, no matter what this full story is with Userbenchmark and their advanced marketing devices BS. I think I just think there's something so funny about this where I think no matter what the actual story is, there's an implicit admission by them that their benchmarking tool doesn't actually do anything or report the real world performance, because either they're saying either way what they're saying is this engineering sample from AMD abuses their benchmarking suite or whatever you want to call it to make it look like it's better than it really is, which seems to me to say, oh, we know that this isn't a real benchmark, and either AMD abused our BS system or we're using our own BS system to try to make AMD look bad, which either way, they're just shooting themselves in the foot when I think either way you look at it, you know?
And I mean, think of how quickly they responded to that advanced marketing devices thing and how quickly they had all these things to say.
Yeah.
They probably, but I'm told they made it up, that they faked the benchmark and like you say, it's like, so doesn't that just show your benchmarks mean nothing anyways? Whether AMD did it or not.
Ultimately, I mean, it's funny if they did this themselves, but ultimately I don't think it matters, because no matter what the story is here, it means Userbenchmark doesn't report good numbers, or not good, I shouldn't say good numbers, doesn't report numbers that are real world meaningful. Yeah. You know? Like, it's a stupid company.
It's startling to me how many people still use it, though.
Yeah,
it's the first on the Google search for some reason for benchmarks.
Or whenever I see like something on Reddit about this, because all this stuff periodically makes its way to Reddit, there's usually a few comments that are like, oh, I use them to, you know, decide what parts I'm going to get. And that every time I see a story like this on Reddit, there's a few converts like, oh, I guess I won't use Userbenchmark anymore, which means, oh, they might have built a really stupid freaking system for no reason. I mean, I think I've said this before. Ultimately, it's not that important at the end of the day if like you're building a gaming system and you decided to get an 11400 or something. It's not like the biggest world-ending deal, but it's crap. And
the stuff they say about Radeon graphics though is absolutely absurd.
Oh, I know. Like the RDNA 2 refresh stuff was hilarious.
And they acted like Ampere was the second coming of Christ and a charity that Nvidia would give you a high-end card for $500, 2080 Ti performance for $500. And meanwhile, it was selling for like $700 to $800 when they wrote that up.
Although they did really like the 6800, if I'm remembering correctly.
Oh, really?
They liked that card specifically, which is interesting, being the lowest volume card in RDNA 2.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I've had people ask, like, is there like anything AMD can do about like is it borderline defamation how they just push so hard to make this thing appear at the top of Google search and then it always says crazy stuff. And it's like, I don't think they quite can, but it is one of those things where I almost wonder, and then if like AMD were to say something publicly about Userbench, is that just going to make more people discover Userbench? I don't know, but
it's probably not worth it. I mean, it's not like they have a ton of advertising or anything. It's mostly word of mouth, and anytime Userbenchmark gets brought up at this point, they're laughed out of the comment section because it's a terrible website that I don't understand how it's still up. Like, who's spending money to keep that site up?
I don't know. All right, now let's get into a single corrections in emissions. QH Freddy writes in and he says, in Broken Silicon 164, you point out that Intel isn't showing minimum 1% FPS in their graphs as being an indication that they're hiding the frame pacing issues behind average FPS with Alchemist. I don't think this conclusion can be made given that every company has almost always used average FPS in their graphs. So I think this is a fair point that this is just the standard of what people show. But for me, AMD and Nvidia, they've earned the right for us to assume there's probably not horrible frame pacing. You can say I'm biased towards, whatever, but I'm sorry, guys. This was a whole thing AMD had to deal with and Nvidia had to deal with, from Kepler to now, and they both seem to have it under control. So I think I can be forgiven for saying, there's been countless reporting and presentations from these NVIDIA and AMD about frame pacing and like what they're doing about it, and what they're like. They literally have parts of reveals where AMD goes through like latency and pacing as a whole subject. In the fact that Intel isn't doing that at all makes me say you haven't earned the right for us to assume, and the benchmarks are showing there's an issue.
And every time I see I've seen the benchmarks for those 4-ARC graphics cards, and the crux of all of those reviews are benchmark videos is about the frame times. At a certain point, it kind of feels like Intel is trying to hide it,
Yeah,
it's hard to say.
I mean, on the surface, you'd go, hey, that's just how they show averages, but they haven't even told us the specs for the A750 yet. They haven't really gone into XE super sampling, basically can't be tested yet. I mean, yeah, no, like they tell us nothing. They show these averages and we don't even know the specs of the graphics cards. And I think I want to know what frame pacing we're seeing when they make these specific claims of tiers of optimization, working well in these types of games. They make these claims and then they only show averages and we don't know the specs. To me, I don't think you can say it's like intentionally misleading in a way of like, it's not like Intel's going out there and portraying a graph no one else has done before. That's fair, QH Freddy. I take that point. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but this is all you're telling us. We don't even know the specs. Early benchmarks are showing frame pacing issues. So when I see those averages, I have no clue what it's actually like. Whereas if I look at an average for AMD or Nvidia, I can almost entirely assume the averages have good frame pacing.
Well, yeah, and it's gotten progressively, well, I don't even know if I should say progressively better over time. Like, I just think there was a point where, especially AMD in like 2011, 2012, had some pretty bad frame pacing issues. And then when I had my 390, my memory is the frame pacing was pretty good with that. And then it's gotten just progressively better where, there's practically no frame variance anymore with AMD or Nvidia, it seems like.
It's crazy smooth. And again, I keep bringing it up as someone who tested, a GTX 580, and it was a 3 gigabyte version, so it had enough RAM in the games and the settings I did. I'm telling you, at the same frame rates, it does not feel as good as a recent graphics card. Not even close.
Oh,
Kepler felt a little better, actually.
I can remember going back, like, thinking back, yeah, frame times were just terrible back then. And I don't know if I could have put a name to it at the time because I just didn't know what these stats were as well. But I remember games just 60 FPS felt way more stuttery than 60 FPS does now.
Yeah.
And I guess I haven't had any experience with ARC, obviously, but it seems like they're taking a step back to 2010 or maybe even worse with those frame times.
Yeah. All right. That's enough of the opening reader mails and segments, I think. Let us now get into story number 1. NVIDIA overstock in Lovelace update. What's NVIDIA doing? When will the 4070 launch? Over the past couple of weeks, the NVIDIA leaking hasn't stopped. Far from it. As one would expect, it's included the usual torrent of seemingly random die configurations of power consumption for 8102, 103, and 104. And also a ton of speculation about when the RTX 4000 series itself will launch, although in this writer's opinion, despite the noise, not much has really changed outside of just more background info popping up that we probably shouldn't always take seriously. What's been interesting, though, in this writer's opinion, is how NVIDIA has been handling their Ampere oversupply issues, and that info is important as it is linked to when Lovelace is launching. In a few videos, recently Moore's Law has leaked that the 450-watt RTX 4090 that is poised to roughly double RTX 3090 performance is almost 100% launching in October. NVIDIA is now briefing their partners for a launch in October, though the day is not selected yet. Furthermore, the RTX 4080 and maybe 4070 are said to be under consideration for a launch in that same month, if not at least this year. This flies in the fact of contrary rumors from other outlets that recently claimed Lovelace would not launch this year. It will, people. However, the scope of the launch is still not decided for quite understandable reasons. NVIDIA wants to see how much Ampere stock is left over before making the final decision next month. Indeed, the biggest thing Moore's Law has had leaked on NVIDIA subjects recently is that NVIDIA has literally stepped in, bought up large sums of yet-to-be-used GA102 stock from AIBs, and then is assumedly using them in other products or throwing them away, and doing another few things I actually still can't say yet to assist AIBs or push AIBs to support Lovelace. And so it must be noted, though, that some of the price assisting actions will expire by September, that after that, AIBs are on their own to sell off GA104 and lower, although they think they will be able to sell off most of GA102 by then, which is important because Lovelace is going to replace high-end Ampere. Finally, note that this writer does have the opinion that no matter what happens with stock, NVIDIA is likely to at least paper launch or directly leak the RTX 4070 and 4080 by the end of November in order to stave off customers from considering buying RDNA 3. Okay, so yeah, there's been continued talk about Lovelace launches and overstock. There's been some people that were like, oh, it's not launching this year. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, could something change? Yes, but like at this point, I'm now hearing that NVIDIA is literally briefing partners to prepare for an October launch for the 4090, that they're thinking about launching the others. What do you think about this, Dan? And then also just what you've heard, what I've told you about NVIDIA shifting GA102.
I mean, if they want to launch the 4070 but or up this year, I would assume, or 4070 and 4080 this year, I would assume they kind of have to get GA102 out the door, or they need to be able to decrease the price of GA102 cards a lot. I would think, like the 3090 new needs to fall like below $1,000 if they want to launch a 4080.
Which it's pretty much getting there. So in the 3080 Ti's, I think around 800 pretty often now.
Okay. I mean, I guess I don't know what the 4070 and 4080 how they'll stack against the 3090. Well, I would assume both are going to be stronger. But
the 4080 should be 10 to 30% stronger, I think, than a 3090 Ti. Maybe a little better than that. Okay. You know, in that ballpark. Better. Notably better like the 3080 was than the 2080 Ti.
Mm-hmm. And I would think a 4070 would probably then be
around 3090 Ti.
Okay, so those both need to fall below. I mean, those need to drop precipitously now, or they need to get rid of the remaining stock, because the 4070 is going to cost $500 probably. I mean,
I think 600, but 500 to 600 I think is pretty safe bet.
Yeah, but you can't be selling a 3090 for $1,100 or $1,000 still when something stronger comes out, even though presumably it will have less RAM, but still.
Well, and that's why you're seeing, you know, and I have an article up here me and Dan are looking at, the 3090 Ti, one of the models on EVGA's website hit $1,149, which is $1,000 below where it was just like 3 months ago. You bought that. I don't know what to tell you, Amanda. You were warned anyways. Like, you knew Lovelace was coming out this year, and it's like, why do you think they're cutting the 3090 Ti pricing in half in some places right now? Well, it's August. Lovelace comes out in October. They know they've got probably a month at most to get rid of the top models. After that, well, they just have a shit ton of GA104 and 106, and they're just going to have to figure out what they're going to do with it. But if you think about it, you can kind of see how NVIDIA doesn't really need a price cut the 3070 yet if it just gets towards $500. That's still cheaper probably than what the 4070 will be, and they can do a minor price cut last minute if they need to. Like, all hands on deck is to just sell off the GA102 cards, because everything below that, whatever, they'll still be profiting if they were to sell 3070s for $400. And you could totally see a situation where a 4090 launches for $1,500, a 4080 launches for $800, 4070 launches for $600, and they just price cut the 3070 to $450 or $400. Then it's like, yep, pay 50% more for the 4070. It's 50% better.
I think ideally, though, if they're going to be launching 8102 and maybe 8103 this year, I think going forward by that point, you really might just want to have like 3060s in stock at that point until they replace it with until they can replace it with the lower end.
If they were 6 gigabytes, it'd be a great idea, but they're 12, so.
Yeah, that's true. 3060 Ti's, maybe get rid of the 3060, I don't know. But,
yeah.
Because I don't know. It's just going to be a weird scenario if prices for Ampere cards don't drop and they release a 4090 for $1,500 again, and then a 4080 for, I don't know, maybe even $800.
It's my
They're
guess what it
going
will
to
cost, you know.
the AIBs are going to be. I mean, they're going to be cannibalizing the AIBs if they do that, which, I mean, I guess makes sense why maybe they need to buy off stock from them to, maintain a good relationship with their AIBs.
Well, and I said this in one of the videos that's quoted for this kind of summary of all of this stuff that's been coming out from me these past couple weeks regarding these subjects. This was that AIB revolt I talked about. Like, I've had people behind the scenes refer to it now. Like, there really was a thing where AIBs are like, hey, look, we know we have to buy you from you, Nvidia, but we don't anymore because we have too much stock. Seriously, we don't want Lovelace stock unless we can get rid of GA102. And I think Nvidia realized they can do things with these dies that the AIBs can't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, but like, there's so many things I can think about they might do with them. Could be a tax write-off, throwing it away. Or, I mean, like GeForce Now. Like, maybe they were planning to use Lovelace for GeForce Now. Well, if you have all these dies that aren't going to sell, just make a bunch of 30, 80, 12 gigabytes and throw them into the GeForce Now servers. Or, I mean, think about this. I think AMD's can get very aggressive with Professional this generation with RDNA 3. Mm-hmm. And I've heard NVIDIA's is going to be pretty cool as well, Lovelace Professional. I would expect nothing less. So, they're going to have to price cut, the A series eventually. Why not just use all these GA102 dies to make an army of A5000s? And then even if they were sold for $2,000, even if they were sold for 40% off, they made their money back. But these AIBs will not make their money back on any of these dies. So it would make sense for Nvidia to make a deal with them. Oh, well, we can profit off of this. And if you're saying you literally won't buy Lovelace, okay, fine, you win. You buy a bunch of Lovelace, and we'll find a way to profit off of these dies selling A series or GeForce Now, something. There's so many things NVIDIA can do where AIBs are just like, well, I guess we're...
Yeah, the only thing I'm concerned about with this generation specifically is just because prices took such a long time to start dropping, where you typically have a more slow curve down in price performance. You slowly have a slow curve down in the price. You might just have like this point where there's a couple month period where price performance, like, I don't know, frickin' doubles seemingly because you get a 4090 for the same price as a 3090, and that kind of just forces Ampere off the market. And I don't know, that would I'm worried a lot of people are going to be left pissed off that at the point they bought a card, I
mean, I think some people will feel burned, but it's like, maybe this was the most extreme example, but these things happen. There's mining booms, there's shortages. There's a time where a factory exploded and we couldn't get new RAM for a year. RAM prices went insane, remember? It wasn't from mining. Things happen, and it's cyclical. And, I guess the other thing I would say, though, is it's funny, the 3070 never really was $500 that consistently, let's be honest. It was more of like a $600 card most of the time, but... my understanding is that, at first GA102 wasn't very profitable at MSRP with the Founders Cooler. The 3070 was. It was within their wanted margins. And so the 3070 was really never bad price performance. To this day, it's actually aged pretty well. You can see a situation where, again, it's never been bad price performance. We dropped the price to $400. And the only reason the 3090 Ti, 3080 12 gigabyte, all of these like 4 cards at the top have looked so insane with their price cuts is because they were always horrible price performance. There were like 5 cards spread across about 25% performance gaps, like every 5% stronger than a 3080 12 gigabyte, 5% stronger than that 3080 Ti, 5% stronger than that 3090, it's absolutely hilarious. And so if you have if half of your lineup, like a third of your lineup is cards above $800, once you're going to replace everything above $800, there's going to be a bunch of cards that just lose half their value. But the mid-range from NVIDIA, or like the 3070, maybe it loses 20%, and if the 4070 is $600, 50% more money for 50% more performance.
Yeah, I know. It's just at a certain point, even the 3070 is going to have to be like $300 though, and
It's going to have to be, but I think that's why I hear zero about the 4060. I don't think, and I guess this kind of gets me into another thing I want to wrap up about this conversation. I'm not saying the 4080 and the 4070 will like really launch this year, but the more I think about it, the more I go, well, maybe Nvidia doesn't need to do this because AMD's only launching Navi 31, which we'll get to that in the next story this year. But at the same time, Navi 31 could be a few SKUs. I wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia at least launches like the 4080, paper launches it. That way, they have the 4090 at top, and they launch something on paper. So anyone who's thinking of getting like a 7800 XT goes, well, the 4080's out. I'll just wait for that to come in stock. And then in reality, it's not in stock for like 5 months. And Nvidia's just like, well, it's out of stock, but you can get this. Oh, look at this new 3080 for $500. You want to get that on EVGA? Because that's honestly what I suspect is going to happen. Is Nvidia is going to paper launch the 4080 and 4070. Again, 5 cards are sold on Newegg. They'll go, it was real. And then they'll just try to use that as a way to get people into trying to buy last gen Ampere and say, oh, no, don't buy the 7800. Don't buy the 7700 XT. The 4080's out. It'll come in stock. Wait for that.
Hopefully that's a less viable strategy this time around, though, because I think part of the reason that was so effective last generation, or you could kind of do that last generation, is, we were in a huge mining boom, and now mining is crashing, and I think that should make availability a lot better this generation compared to last gen.
Well, yeah, and I've seen some people say, I don't want to buy any cards. I don't want to reward these companies. How can you say you should ever consider buy now? Because I have warned people that I do think some models could go up in price in September, and then the 4090 will come out. And I can't promise you how much volume there will be day one, although I think there's going to be more this time than last time. Let me say that. But so, again, like what I've been trying to tell people is if you see a 6700 for like close to 300, a 6600 for like 250 or less, or I've noticed on EVJ's website a 2060 is almost 200 or less. It's like, well, I don't think you're going to do better than those cards below $400 for a long, long time, guys. So I'm not telling you to rush out and buy a new high-end card. I'm just saying if you're a budget gamer, they're not going to replace the low end for a while, and I think the low end may be bottoming in price now before the mid-range will. TMC Paint writes in, he says, howdy. After Lovelace launches, do you see Nvidia continuing to manufacture any Samsung 8nm Ampere dies? If so, which ones? I wouldn't mind seeing Nvidia keep making GA104 for dual sourcing. Thanks. Well, so I think this may have used to have been a plan. Like they were like, hey, if we put a generation on Samsung as well, next gen, if we need more supply, we can just keep making it, on 2 areas. But they overproduced, so I actually think that's very unlikely now.
Yeah, I mean, what? Maybe 106 or something?
Well, that's the thing, though.
What's on 106? It's just the 3050 Ti. I mean, 3050 that's on 106 for desktop, right?
Well, 3060.
Yeah, and the 3060.
And the 3050 really doesn't need to be on that. It could be using GA107, and I still don't really understand what's going on there. But I don't think they're making many of them. So I think it may just be the worst of the worst yields, I guess. But honestly, I would be surprised if they didn't keep making GA107 for a while, because they could use that to make a RTX 3040 eventually. Like right now they have the 2050, which is also based on GA107, by the way, which is so weird they call it the 2050. And then there's also something like an MX 650.
Or do you think there's any, this is just random, but like any chance that they would ever make like a 3060 6 gigabyte and say have this for like
250 or something?
That's just random throwing something out there, but
yeah, or even do something even weirder and they call it the desktop like 3050 Ti, and it's really just a 6 gigabyte 3060 with maybe 2 more SMs disabled.
Yeah,
6 gigabytes, but it has less RAM than the 3050, and they're like,
sure, here.
I don't know. I think that's something to think about, because I do hear that the bombs for Lovelace are even higher than Ampere. So, because they're on 4 nanometer, they're pretty. I mean, I know they're monolithic, but they're like the most advanced monolithic you could imagine. So I don't know. I think they'll keep making GA107. TMC patent, and I think there's a chance they keep making 106. They probably keep doing low production runs of all of them, but in effect, I'd be surprised if they made more than the low end, the very low end, and mostly again for like weird things, like you said, if they needed a 3066 gigabyte, if they need MX650s, so they don't cut into TSMC manufacturing.
Yeah, I just think it's in a weird place where I don't think you would want to make anything stronger than the 3060. Really, but the 3060 has 12 gigs of RAM, so that's where I just throw it. I don't know, maybe they would make a 3060 6 gigabyte and below or something like that. Or I don't know, call that the 3050 Ti or something.
I don't know what Everman writes in. And he says, Aloha, law is dead, brothers. Is the Ampere oversupply problem also an AMD problem? AMD has its own exclusive AIBs in the form of Sapphire, Power Color, ASRock, and XFX, but I don't think any of these are as big or recognized as ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte, or even, for sure, EVGA. So are the AIBs also telling AMD that they can't sell their cards, these AIBs he's saying, like someone like ASUS or MSI, because they need to sell off Ampere stock? So they can't make next-gen a lot. I think that's an interesting thought. Is RDNA 3 also potentially delayed due to NVIDIA's Ampere shenanigans? The answer is yes. Like, this affects AMD not as much. It doesn't affect the AMD-only AIBs as much. So there will still be Sapphire, Power Color, and ASRock and XFX chomping at the bit to get RDNA 3 to sell.
Yeah.
But yes, the Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte, yeah, there's going to be more lagging here. And there's a reason AMD has pushed Navi 33 back until next year, and it's now entirely for laptop.
Well, yeah, but no matter what, there's still going to be they're competing with NVIDIA's stock no matter what. Or I should say not stock, they're competing with their supply no matter what.
And their own overproduction to a certain degree of RDNA 2, to a much, much less degree, but it is a thing.
But like if mid-2023, the market is still being flooded with like low-end Ampere GPUs or something, that doesn't put AMD in a good position to launch low-end cards because they have to be competitive with those Ampere prices. Like, they can't just say, well, screw it, this is a newer card, we're going to charge you more for worse performance.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not how people...
So whether AIBs were threatening them, or whether AIBs were directly telling AMD this or not, it affects them the same way, really.
Yeah.
Deep Glugs writes in, he says, in my experience, much, if not most of amateur AI research is being done on large 24 gigabyte GPUs like the 3090, but 24 gigabytes is quickly becoming not enough for the state-of-the-art neural networks. Have you heard any rumors of upcoming cards with more than 24 gigabytes, say a Titan-class Lovelace with 48? Well, it's up to NVIDIA if they launch a 48 gigabyte Lovelace card. That's something they just could do. So I'm not going to say yes or no. Right now, they haven't briefed partners on one.
That sounds to me like still it would probably be more of a professional focus card more than a gaming focus card, though, or gaming advertised card, because I don't think you need to go above 24 yet. I mean, you might get one.
I'm trying to think of, like, to me, 48 gigabytes is kind of like what 12 gigabytes was when Titan Maxwell came out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, they kind of made sense to go above 6 gigabytes after the Kepler generation of Titans because they weren't filling up, but they were getting there, and it's not really a Titan anymore. But 12 gigabytes feels like what 48 gigabytes is now. You're not filling up 48 gigabytes in a game, dude, for years, unless some fundamental shift happens. And if it does, well, you're going to want to wait for whatever that shift is that required the extra RAM anyway. So I don't know. I don't really see a point in a 48 gigabyte only gaming card or gaming first card. They could certainly do it, though, if they just wanted an excuse to charge an extra $1,000 for it, I guess.
I mean, it's going to happen in the next 4 years, I'm sure, but I just don't think there's a point in doing it yet.
I think it's like with 12 gigabytes with Titan Maxwell. If we're being honest, back then, with Maxwell, 9 gigabytes would have been like a crazy amount, and 12 just seemed like, okay. I don't know, man. Most cards right now are 3 gigabytes. You're saying 6 would be nice, but 12 is absurd. Like, yeah, just kind of like 24 is nice, but 48 is absurd.
Yeah.
What I will say is there's professional cards coming, I'm pretty sure, with maybe 48, 96 gigabytes.
Oh, yeah, that's not a surprise.
But I don't think you need me to tell you that a source told me that. I mean, what do you think they're going to do next gen? Reese, what is it? What's this message over here? You want treats, belly rubs, walks, and to not overpay for Windows keys. Well, I can definitely handle the treats, belly rubs, and walks on my own. I can't help Reese with getting reasonably priced Microsoft keys without cdkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffer.com, a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law's Dead and its community for any time someone in my community needs reasonably priced Office or Microsoft operating system keys without paying excessive monopolistic pricing. But that's not all they offer either. They also have great deals on PlayStation, Steam, Origin, and Uplay keys, and physical products like gaming chairs and keyboards and mice as well. They are always running sales, but make sure you use the best code possible provided for Moore's Law's Dead fans for the biggest discount. Use the links in the description or on screen, and then the code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Windows codes, or Die Shrink for 3% off everything else on the website. Clicking on these links really does help the channel a lot, and using the offer codes helps it even more. It keeps CDKey Offer as a reliable sponsor for this community and for you to use again in the future as they keep sponsoring us. Go to cdkeyoffer.com today. Story number 2, Navi 31 is likely the only RDNA 3 configuration launching in 2022, and we know how it and Navi 32 and Navi 33 are organized. So I didn't do a write-up for this one. This was one of those things that was somewhat not last minute, but like literally I put out the video for this while you're getting on the plane after Skyjuice on Angstronomics put out this update. I guess let me get the stuff that I leaked the week before out of the way. I'd already been leaking that Navi 33 was mobile focused, mobile first, launching in 2023, and that although some people have told me recently, no, really though, they were planning to launch a desktop with it this year. Not anymore. Not with the new, supply issues. But outside of the Navi 33 laptop first launching next year stuff, and Navi 31 being the only card coming out this year, with people telling me that it's, like I even showed an email on screen from one of my sources, like saying Navi 32 is nowhere near ready. Like could be Q2, Q3 next year for all I know. Angstronomics came in and said a lot more specific stuff. So I didn't do a write-up for this. There's a link in the description for the video where I go through what he said, but I guess, let me do a quick summary and then we'll start talking about the stuff he leaked. So Angstronomics put out basically the entire design of RDNA 3's Navi 31, 32, and 33 configurations. The big takeaways immediately are the way RDNA 3 was designed was to minimize area while maximizing performance per watt on the smallest area, which frankly you would say is not always what you want to do, but I don't know. Nvidia seems to just like stretching their legs out every now and then, and AMD really seem to obsessively try to minimize how much space they take up in addition to the performance per watt. Part of that is a new generation of Infinity Cache. It's not just more of the same. It's a new type of Infinity Cache, or a new generation, I should say, of Infinity Cache that is higher bandwidth, lower latency, and they halved as much as there is per section of Infinity Cache, but it moves the data faster. And so there's less of a energy penalty going through it. And it's pretty insane because it suggests that there will be Navi 31 models almost certainly with just 96 megabytes of Infinity Cache, the same amount as Navi 22 right now, the 6700 XT. However, there's a caveat. They can stack another layer of cache on top of that, making it 192 megabytes. And so then you go down the list and, this has been heavily rumored by other people. This is what a large part of the notes I was putting together to leak in a couple of weeks, but clearly Angstronomics beat me to leaking this type of information. That it's 96 legacy compute units, double the amount of stream processors or ALUs per compute unit per work group. So somewhat Ampere-like. More, I believe more L1 and L2 cache is stated in there as well. And so I mean, if we're comparing it to what we have now, just keep in mind each compute unit I'm about to say, they don't really think of them as compute units anymore, but if you wanted to convey it in old terms, still, even in old terms, these have double the FP32 cores inside of them. 96 for Navi 31, and then 60 for Navi 32, and then 32 for Navi 33. And then the top one's 384-bit. The second one is 256-bit. The third one is 128-bit, as I also leaked, and a bunch of other people have too, and 8 gigabytes of RAM. The shocker there being, though, with Navi 33, well, two shockers. 32 megabytes of infinity cache, which I was told recently it could be 64. This is even half of the lowest thing I was told, so I don't know what to say.
It seems like just across the board, it's 32 megabytes lower for each die.
Well, or it's like half as much, unless you take into account they can stack cache on it, which I'm told right now they can't with Navi 33.
Okay, I mean, not a surprise.
But honestly, the biggest shocker for me was that Navi 33 has a 200 millimeter squared die, roughly, according to Angstronomics. And I just want to be clear, we're jumping around a little bit on this one, but what I can confirm, and I said this in the video, reaching out to a bunch of sources, is the CU counts, or the ALU counts, the bus counts, the infinity cache. Basically, the majority of the specs are correct for all of them, as far as I know. But I cannot confirm the die sizes of anything myself. I'm not saying it's not true. I would assume it probably is true with how much this is confirmed to be correct. But I cannot personally say the die sizes are what they are. I just don't have that information. So, right or wrong.
I mean, I guess they all do seem pretty small, right? Or what? Because 31 is going to be, I mean, just quick mental math, that's about, 540 millimeters squared? Which, I don't know, that's not tiny for...
Right, and that's even without, you're talking for Navi 31, you combine the...
I combined the 6 dies.
Which I guess I didn't even say that. If you're listening to this and didn't watch the video, let me just be clear. The way RDNA 3 is organized outside of the monolithic versions, which Navi 33 is a monolithic version on 6 nanometer. They have one 5 nanometer die of most of the stuff, including the work groups, compute units. And then around that, they have infinity cache / memory controller dies. So there's 6 memory controller dies for 384-bit, 4 for 256-bit for Navi 32. If you were to combine all 6 of these memory controller dies and the graphics die for Navi 31, you get to, I think I added it up, it's like 533 millimeters squared, which sounds small to some people, but it's actually, I believe, slightly bigger than Navi 21. And then add the fact that they're likely to add another layer of cache on top of that as well. And you're getting to something that if it was a monolithic design, it'd be probably over 600 millimeters squared. Because there's other things you have to do with a monolithic design that you can't save as much on space. You need a little bit of dead silicon to space things out for frequency reasons. And Navi 31, it really isn't any smaller than I would have expected. All things added up, including the layer of infinity cache on top of the other layers, you're looking at something that's about the same size as AD102. And Navi 32 isn't small either. It's a little bigger than Navi 22, actually, if you add it all up, I believe.
Yeah, and this is marginally bigger. It's 20 millimeters. Navi 21 is about 20 millimeters squared smaller than 31.
So they're using new nodes, and it's bigger. So this explains why the performance is going to be so much higher, guys. Navi 33, though, is like a third less in size than I expected.
Navi 33, according to him, is 200 millimeters squared? Yeah, that's tiny.
And I was expecting, I said that I was warned by some sources that the estimates out there for Navi 33's die size are too big. And I took that to mean, okay, so below 400, maybe 360 to 400 millimeters squared. Apparently not. Apparently it's, and there was a bigger version. He does say that in the article that there was a bigger version. There were versions that even used the memory controller dies. So for all I know, it could have been bigger, and it was going to have more infinity cache, which would have made the die size bigger. But still, there's no way around it. If this actually ends up in how small it is, I don't know. That's just so much smaller than expected.
I mean, and you have to look at it. I mean, it's basically everything on Navi 33 is you slash everything by 2/3 versus Navi 31. So, I mean, that's roughly in line. It's a little bit bigger than if you just slash the die size by 2/3. But
yeah. And I don't know. What's interesting, too, is what he says. Because I guess let me say this here, then. I've seen a lot of people see this, and the two big reactions were, wow, AMD's brilliant. This is going to be substantially cheaper to manufacture than Lovelace. Nvidia's in trouble. But then there's also been people going, well, this is going to be not that strong. Maybe it'll be on the lower side of the estimates I've heard for like Navi 31 and 32 and stuff, but No, the facts don't lie here, guys. They're going with a 50% bigger bus, leveraging 5 and 6 nanometer when they used 7 nanometer before. It's a brand new architecture that I'm told is more impressive than RDNA 2 was over RDNA 1, guys, on its own, without being disaggregated into multiple dies. And it has, 1,200 shaders instead of 5,000 last gen. Well, I think this can totally double performance. Now, what I've been warned is do not expect it to be over double, though. Like, a lot of people have been hyping up nonstop for years. But no, I think it's totally plausible. It hits like 80, 90% for the top one or higher, too. And that's the other thing one of my sources warned me about, though, is he's like, the numbers I saw, though, that weren't quite double, this was before they were going to overclock it. And if you listen to their public statements, AMD's literally said, if NVIDIA raises power consumption, we will. So yeah. I think we can take it to the bank then. RDNA 3 is about 50-60% more efficient per watt. It was always planned to be about up to 375 watts. Now it might be 400 watts or something. So what does that tell you? Even if you lose some efficiency, it should roughly double RDNA 2 performance. And if you add in ray tracing, I bet it more than doubles.
I still have a hard time with like the core count thing, because I guess we'll see how it shakes out, whether the increase in core count, if it's kind of what happened with Ampere, where they were advertising like a doubling in compute.
What I've been told is it's not linear.
I doubt it will
be. But they can clock it faster, and it is
well, and they get comparatively more. It's like the top Navi 31 will have more than double the top Navi 31 will have more than double the cores of Navi of the 6900 XT probably.
Yeah.
Unless they cut that thing down a lot.
But yeah, so it's not just and there's a video I put out called RDNA 3 Economics where I talk about how AMD wouldn't be disaggregating 3D stacking, moving to multiple chiplets unless it was cheaper. They don't just, we found a way to spend more money. Like, they would only do this if they could get high performance out of it and if they can make it cheaper. Everything AMD has made since Lisa Su took over was fundamentally trying to maximize efficiency at every level. They're not just going to, we spent more and it's crazy looking. That's what Intel's doing with Ponte Vecchio. They can't launch it. If AMD is doing this, it's cheaper to make than if it was only on 5 nanometer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, just to debunk some other things I could see people saying, like, but some of it's 6 nanometer, so how does this compete with Lovelace? Yeah, well, but it's the portions that don't matter if it's on 6 nanometer. Like, there's no performance loss, or if there's, it's like 10% with it being on 6 nanometer versus 5. And the fact that all these dies are so small means they're almost all golden samples. So they're going to be perfect voltage curves for the entire... This thing's going to be insanely efficient and cheaper to make than Lovelace, which... Again, whether AMD wins, ties, or slightly loses performance, and I'm not saying they will lose. Everyone's like, he's wavering. I'm saying it's always been they're going to be close. Even if they did lose, I think they're going to have something that uses like 30% less energy and sells for less money anyway, so I think they just win.
If that's what matters to people is price performance at the top end. But that's the big problem. It's like, I think you're in a weird spot where if they sold the 7900 XT for like, I don't know, $1,400 or something, and it was 5% weaker than the 4090 for 2,000, or I don't know, whatever price they're going to sell it for. A lot of people go for the 4090 because, at that point you're drag racing.
Yeah,
a lot of the time.
Well, and one of my sources that didn't get back to me in time for the video, but got back to me after the video was out. Actually, 2 sources did. One, there was something in my video where I said I can't confirm. I could 100% confirm the specs of Navi 31 that Angstronomics said. I could not personally confirm from anyone the specs of the number of ALUs in Navi 32. Recently, guys, someone reached out to me and said, that is correct, actually. So it is the 7,680. FP32 cores for Navi 32. So I'll just directly say, no dispute there anymore. It's correct. But also what's interesting is looking at Navi 33, and people are like, well, how strong is this going to be? Well, I was told Navi 21 performance, and you guys have noticed the past few months I've been focusing on, Navi 21 1080p performance. I don't know that doesn't necessarily mean it'll beat the 6900 XT, but what's interesting is There's still a source maintaining it's going to be around the performance he's been saying the whole time. And there's another source saying, it should probably, if they pushed it, beat the 6800 in 1080p at least. And then Angstronomics himself says Navi 33 outperforms top-end Alchemist, which, remember, guys, uses a die size supposedly twice as big as Navi 33 while pulling less power. I mean, if it beats top Alchemist, that means it's at least close to a 3070 anyways, which isn't that far away from the 6800. It's like 15% weak. So it's totally plausible. It's still Navi 21 performance and 1080p are close. And I got to be honest, even if it was just like a 6800 in 1080p, this is the most phenomenal architecture ever made if this die size is correct. And it's the only reason I question it, not because I'm questioning Skyjuice. It's just, it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, at 6 nanometer, if they fundamentally redesigned an architecture to make best use of 6 nanometer over 7, you can get like a 10-20% boost with it. But going from something, what you're saying is they're going to at least take Navi 23, make it a little smaller, and make it perform 50% better, is basically what it sounds like. That sounds absurd.
Unless it clocks insanely high, but I don't know.
It's plausible it hits like 3.2 gigahertz, I guess. But I'm going to have to see this to believe it, because if this is a card this big on 6 nanometer that performs this well, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like, we just need to declare it. This is their Maxwell moment. They freaking pulled a rabbit out of a hat.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think 3 gigahertz is the, I don't know, highest I would guess. Like, I don't think they're going to be going to 3.5 or anything anytime soon. But
some people think they could, by the way. But that's one of those things where it's like, well, I'll believe Zen 2 hits 5 gigahertz when I see it in a package. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to say about this story? I mean, we know it's now out there what Navi looks like, and I think no matter how you put it, AMD has the better architecture, it seems, unless more surprises come out. But that's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, it really is almost just waiting for AMD and Nvidia to actually show off something official, because, you have the estimate for the performance you're going to get. You basically have what RDNA 3 is going to look like. I don't know how much else there is to say about them. Yeah.
All right, QH Freddy writes in, and he says, it seems rather interesting to me that Navi 31 seems to have gone from a 256-bit bus to a 384-bit bus through development. Could this be, with the lowering of Infinity Cache, be a sort of reverse of what Navi 21 went through with 384 to 256-bit with cache? Or is it just something that is necessitated by the vast performance uplift rumor to be brought to the table? It also does really change the perspective of Navi 33 with its 128-bit bus as well, as I think, because now that is only a third of the throughput of top RDNA 3. My understanding is Navi 21 was always 256-bit. Now, I know there were rumors of 384-bit on that one, but what I was told is AMD... actually, you know what? Let me take that back. Actually, there was. I remember. Very, very early on, supposedly there was a 384-bit design for Navi 21, very early, and then never went anywhere. And then they put it in the drivers for fun anyways last minute to mess with leakers. So, yeah, I think there was a little more deliberation this time around, but in a way, I guess you could say there was deliberation either way. Yes, it's kind of a reverse. I think
that is unless you have a scenario where they do 3D stacking of cache for Navi 21, or if one of the SKUs has 3D stacked cache.
Navi 31, you mean?
Did I say 21?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 31, yeah.
Yeah, maybe, depending on what they can do.
Like if we're talking about the ratio of the bandwidth to Infinity Cache.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about, what they did is they said, oh, our first generation of Infinity Cache works insanely well. We actually think it'd be worth just 100 millimeters squared to use a 256-bit bus. Now they're moving, and nodes have become a little more expensive, though, and they might go, well, actually, this time, the new Infinity Cache works twice as well as before. It works twice as well as before, so maybe we just add 70% more bandwidth, 384-bit bus with faster RAM, and then they say, has a little more cache or around the same. Like, we don't actually need more. this time because the bus is bigger and we have access to faster RAM and silicon's more expensive now. Before it wasn't as expensive, now it is. That's just the balance they have to decide on each time.
Yeah.
And I also think there's an interesting thing to consider here with the stacking of the Infinity Cache as well. So if you think about it, they can have a top-end model that they push to like 400 watts with 192 megabytes of Infinity Cache, liquid cooled. That thing's going to be a beast. But they can use that same configuration. And they could maybe have a model with only 96 megabytes of Infinity Cache, cut down central die a little bit. And then they could make a 320-bit version, not using some of the memory controller dies, and also not put cache on it. And you could remove a significant portion of the silicon, literally just not even using it.
Mm-hmm.
So like the way they've designed it, focusing more on a bigger bus, less cache, allows a little more flexibility in that department. And because this is a flexible architecture, I think that makes more sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. So Happy Pill writes in and he says, any word on Navi 32 specs? Well, we already talked about that in launch date. I already said earlier, I think maybe Q2 next year or something. I'd very much like to pick up a 7800 XT, which I presume won't be built on the big die. We'll see. It probably will be, actually. But he goes, but at the same time, my GPU budget is burning a hole in my pocket. And with prices falling so quickly, I'm almost tempted to buy a high-end current-gen product. Will the card I want launch by the end of the year, or should I wait for prices to collapse further and snag a 3080 Ti 6900 XT on the cheap? This 1060 I'm on is getting a bit old, I'm afraid. Thanks for all the amazing content. Well, I'll answer the pricing question. I think this is a very easy... Look, Navi 32 is going to be like 10, somewhere between, we'll see, 10 to 50% better probably than the best cards on the market now. It's going to be between $500 to $800. Do you want to spend $600 now for something 30% weaker than that? That's your choice. Or do you want to wait a year or half a year? Well, half a year to a year to get something that costs the same and is 40% better with better ray tracing. You have a 1060.
Yeah, that or wait and get Navi 31/8102 if you're, I don't know, not opposed to getting Nvidia. I guess I still don't know how they're going to shake out compared to one another.
Again, and so this is where I think people are like, oh, well, you're saying people should buy now all of a sudden. It's like, no. Correct me if I'm wrong again. This whole time I've kept saying, now isn't the worst time to buy, but don't feel rushed.
Yeah.
And you have a 1060, my dude. You might want to feel a little rushed, though. You're the person where I go, I mean, have you considered getting the 6600 for $250 and selling the 1060 for $150, spending $100 to like double your performance and get more RAM? And then that'll let you wait a year. If not, I'll speak for myself. If I were you, I would be looking to get Navi 31 sooner rather than later if I still had a 1060.
Yeah, probably.
But how much did you pay for the 1060? Probably $250. All right, so 5 years later, something twice as good that uses less energy and can do ray tracing. It's not like the 6600 isn't a lot better than what you have for what you spent a while ago. And there's been inflation, and it's the same price. So really, you're spending less if you correct for inflation. Let us move on to story number 3. Pat Gelsinger reported to be fighting to save ARC, where analysts call for its cancellation. All right, Moore's Law's leak of Intel already considering a cancellation of discrete gaming ARC sent shockwaves through the PC gaming and investor communities last month. And since then, there's actually been quite a few updates. In summary, Pat definitely does not want to cancel ARC. He said so publicly in an all-employee meeting a couple weeks ago. And at least for now, he is fighting to keep AXG going in its current form and alleviate any concerns amongst employees. Now, while that may sound reassuring, the rest of the updates Tom has gathered are not 100% good. 100%, the evaluation is underway. Intel is considering canceling ARC to this day, but the decision won't be made for a few months. And the reason they're considering it, to be clear, is because they're not sure if they can afford to keep the group afloat without it making a profit for multiple years. This cannot be made clear enough. Intel doesn't just cancel things because they feel like it. If they cancel desktop ARC discrete roadmaps, it's because they feel it would bankrupt the company and they have to. They cannot afford to just fund it for an entire decade without profits. and they see no evidence that it will profit as soon as they say it will. So outside of that, what else is there to say? Well, analysts, including friend of the show, John Petty, seems to have similar information and is calling for ARC to be canceled or sold off to another company. AXG's marketing continues to be frantic, inconsistent, dishonest, and downright confusing, and there's still no evidence ARC is ready. Right now, on ARC story, the ARC story Intel put out that Moore's Law is dead leaked from a roadmap was published that still not even confirmed the specs of the A750. Despite releasing supposed benchmarks of the elusive card. I've never seen this before. People release 50 benchmarks with no specs. This is insane. And the ARC sweepstakes winners are being offered an i7-12700K instead of an ARC card, suggesting that the A770, if it ever comes out, will likely be $400 at most, and that it might not be ready for at least another month, or why would they be offering a processor instead? Which, yeah, I will directly confirm that my sources tell me A770, by the way, guys, just want to say this, is supposed to launch by the end of August. That's what they tell me. And it's funny because my contacts, they say it's supposed to launch end of August. They don't believe it themselves. But I will say that, as much as a lot of this seems to be negative stuff about ARC, it's supposed to. So we'll see if there's a paper launch end of August. I said it if it happens, Yeah. But I don't know, Dan. What do you... do you have anything to say about all of these updates? I mean, they're offering Alder Lake processors instead of ARC cards. We're halfway into August. Quarter 3 is halfway over, and we still don't know the specs of the cards officially. I know them, but they haven't confirmed them. And it sounds like they may not have the money to keep funding AXG.
I mean, it seems like ARC isn't going well continually. Like, I mean, I don't know what that sweepstakes thing's ultimately means. If they're just saying, I don't remember when that sweepstakes things happened, really. They're just saying, all right, let's just cut our losses and offer people Alder Lake at a certain point. But that doesn't spell good things for ARC to me. And, what I'll say with, like, the whole thing with if they think it's going to bankrupt the company, I mean, I guess that to me sounds like the company's probably in more dire straits than I would have thought, but I don't know.
You saw their earnings. It was worse than I expected. It's really not going well.
You can't keep a division going forever. I don't know how big AXG is compared to the rest of the company, but I don't know, when you have a company where it seems like their core businesses or their core things are going pretty well right now, like their foundries seem to be progressing better than they used to be. Their CPU architecture seem to be going moderately better. It's just I don't know how long you can keep a division that's been floundering for 5 years now. It just
and again, like I've been told I can't say some things, but like what I'll say is they calculated that it should profit by a certain time. I don't remember exactly when there was, so I guess I could just say, like, let's just say they thought they would start profiting by late Battle Mages generation. And they calculated that based on a market that was desperate for graphics cards, where everything sold no matter what, and where mining was exploding. And now that's not happening. And ARC is behind schedule. So, if we didn't think you would profit for another year or two, who's to say it's going to be another 5 years? It could be another 5 years, and they're like, we'll be bankrupt. So,
yeah, and it's getting to a point where the way ARC is working is just bizarre, where they just seem to be announcing things to try to keep driving interest, like Rialto Bridge is a weird thing that they're talking about now, despite the fact that its
Falcon Shores.
Yeah, despite the fact that its predecessor isn't even out yet. Like, are they going to start hyping Battle Mage before the A770 is
I doubt
out?
that. They should be, but with how bad things are going, I think they're at least self-aware enough to not do stuff like that. I bet they start hyping it early next year, though, if the decision is made not to cancel ARC. Which, again, let me say, guys, decision's not made yet.
Yeah, I mean, the goodwill is gone, I think, for ARC, where I think it was there up through at least quarter 2 of this year. And at this
that's
point,
where it started exponentially going down every week.
Yeah, and now it's completely gone, because, like, what is there to say about Intel ARC aside from they seem to keep saying stuff that doesn't happen, and also every benchmark that's been put out that isn't by them is really bad, including from people that they've done sponsorship deals with.
Yeah.
It's not looking good.
No. Annual Chief writes in, he says, "Hi, Tom. More ARC questions. What do you make of Raja's Twitter response to Anshel Sag? I want to say Intel can't be as blatant as doubling down when the leakers are essentially quoting reliable sources in their own roadmaps to the contrary, but why would Raja do something like this if cancellation is all but a done deal and make Intel look even worse in the process? Linus Tech Tips is even putting their weight behind your leak and ignoring Intel at this point." I've noticed that there's like thumbnails like "Stop talking Intel" or something. It's like, do you suppose they just skip Alchemist and go straight to Battle Mage? So you asked a lot of things. Number one, it is not a done deal. It is not a done deal that ARC's canceled. So let's not count our chickens before they hatch. Number two, Raja did not debunk anything. All he said is, we're committed to our roadmap. There will be updates this year.
Yeah.
To me, that was like, we just acknowledged it is screwed. Like, if what you tweet, if people are freaking out, is you tweet, it will come out August and it will be great or something.
Or even
you
if they
even
say
that.
Like, we're going to have a launch, like even acknowledging that there's going to be some type of launch event in the near future. Like not committing to a launch date, even just saying we have an event scheduled or something.
My opinion
would be more committal.
My opinion is, after my leaks came out and like the wave of reviews came out for the A380 that said bad things at the same time, Intel should have just been quiet for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then appeared and said it's launching September. And then put your money where your mouth is. The talking's got to stop. The talking can't go on for 4 months. This is absurd. This is turning into like a Vega rollout. Oh, who else was in charge of Vega?
Well, yeah, and hopefully they can come out in September with like the A750, A770 or something with drivers that reasonably work. Like, I'm not even talking about getting rid of fixing the issues with frame variance all that much even at this point. Like,
just get rid of the graphical glitches. Yeah, like what was it?
Gamers Nexus put out a video recently where they looked through the drivers and they essentially found that it seems like if you change anything in the driver settings, it's not like an issue with frame variance or anything. Like, you just get artifacting, like you get your PC, they almost brick their PC multiple times just adjusting settings in the drivers. Like, I don't remember exactly what happened, but like their computers stopped working with certain certain driver updates until they like reset the BIOS on their ARC graphics cards, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, the only way they were able to figure that out is because they have a ton of monitors and they would still work with some. So like these are fundamental issues where the A380 like can break people's PCs seemingly.
Yeah, and all I can say also to Amiable Chief's question, which just let me scroll back up here and remind myself. Yeah, so no, I don't think they can just skip Alchemist with Battle Mage either. I think if I'm Pat, you've got to prove you can make one generation that works. Like, they have to get Alchemist working, because think of it, guys, the work they're putting into Alchemist is going to apply to Battle Mage. So they need to get their driver team down. They need to get it all launched by the end of Q3. If new silicon is required to make it work perfectly, do that refresh early next year. And I think what we're going to see is, in around November, I think Pat's going to be sitting there and going, okay, are the drivers good? If you need a refresh, does the refresh engineering samples, are they working better? And is Battle Mage on track? If all three of those things aren't yeses, I think if only one of them is a yes, maybe they got half of the program. If all three of them are no's, I think that's where he goes, we can't afford to do this anymore. Again, guys, though, that doesn't mean they get rid of AXG. That doesn't mean they get rid of Raja. That doesn't mean they get rid of the data center line or any of that stuff. Which I think actually there was a question regarding what I just said, so let me skip to that now. Low-Res Gamer writes in, presumably in 480p, and he says, for the Intel AXG group, even if they don't cancel the project or disband the team, there has to be a change in leadership. How do you see such a transition playing out? Who are the most likely suspects to be axed or candidates to take over? And any thoughts on how AXG organization gets so out of context that came to this? Well, the first answer is I don't know. But from what I hear, Raja was just promoted. He's not going to get fired. So let's just leave that at that. I don't know who's going to be whatever. I don't work there. I don't know the hundreds of people that are part of this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. But number two, how did this get out of control? Guys, I think they just tried to do too much. Like, think of, this is something I talked about with John Petty and some other people that have come on the podcast recently where I'm like, think about when I worked at General Motors, I would go, oh, I need to know what engineer's working on this part of that seat. Well, he works here. Let me go walk over and talk to him. And then the next time we had a similar issue, to walk over to the same guy. This is a new team. AMD and Nvidia have had a machine operating gen over gen for decades. Mm-hmm. It's not that Intel doesn't have the money. It's not even that they don't have the engineers. They probably do. The problem is this is their first attempt, and trying to do multiple dies, I think was a mistake. I think they should have made one 128-bit die. I think Battlemage should have made one 192-bit die. And I think Celestials when they should have tried to do multiple configurations.
Yeah, because I mean, when you have a company like AMD or Nvidia, which I mean, what Nvidia is 20-something years old now at this point, right? And
I think they're older than that. Yeah, they're like they're from the 90s or before, Dan.
Okay, so that's 20-something years old.
They're older than 20 years.
And then when you have a RADEON, which used to be ATI, so that's been around for decades too.
Yeah.
When you have a thing where like even a leadership role is replaced, like, well, you have all these cogs that are
that know
working.
What that leader does.
Yeah. Here, when you have a team of, once again, I don't know how big AXG is. I'm assuming it's at least hundreds of people. I mean,
I haven't looked it up recently.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, Intel's a massive company. I wouldn't be surprised if that was in the thousands. But
I mean, yeah, they have 121,000 employees.
When you're assembling a team from whole cloth, like they're having acquiring these huge talents, like from just a couple years ago to like at the earliest 5. It was
storming, norming, performing when you form a group. Right now, they're getting out of the storming. They haven't even normalized a cycle yet.
Yeah. Well, they've
this is technically the second one, but
they've had one cycle, but
it's
so
like
far, but,
it was barely a full cycle though.
Yeah.
And and they've worked on integrated graphics a little bit before, so I don't know, but yeah, it's just they don't have the team it's just guys. It's a new team. They don't know each other's names. We didn't know the PCIe could have this hardware bug. Who's in charge of that? Mm-hmm. Like, to expect to be able to make a lineup that's of multiple dies that competes in the high end, even their second try was stupid. They had the beta gen, should have done one die, and then try all of it. The thing I'm consistently told, and this was something I was warned a year ago from one of my best sources. I won't say his name, but you know this guy is Dan. He goes, I just don't know, Tom. I don't know how Intel's going to deal with not being the best because they can't not do it. And I think if they would have just accepted they're not the best, they could have been fine with Alchemist and had a smaller scope. And maybe they'll realize that now and Battlemage will come out because they will reduce the scope of what it tries to do. But that's what's going to be required. They need to pray they can compete with the 4060 with Alchemist. I mean, with Battlemage. And then they need to pray they can compete with the 5060 with Celestial. And then go for the, 6080.
Yeah.
Timo writes in, he says, hi, Tom. Regarding Pat Gelsinger's latest statements in Tom's Hardware, are these driver software decision blunders believable? Like they said that they used integrated graphics driver packages for the discrete cards that caused horrible issues, and so they were forced to just write them from scratch last minute. And that seems like an amateur mistake and a weird excuse. But if so, these two could be salvaged, right? I'm not disputing that could have happened. I really have nothing to say except that they've had years to make this, whether it's a hardware bug or not. I think it's partially a hardware bug. They've proven that after 3 years, they can't make it work.
Yeah.
What else do you want me to say? If you're Pat and you had all the money in the world, which Intel used to, but they don't anymore, they would say, well, maybe third time will be the charm with Battlemage. Maybe you learned. But if there's any doubt Battlemage won't be third time's the charm, they're like, well, we'll go bankrupt if it's not, so we can't do this anymore. I don't know, whatever man writes out in again. And he says, hello, Tom and Dan. Tom, last week you and John Petty discussed the possibility of Intel selling off the AXG division to someone like Dell or HP. My question, based on that discussion, is why would anybody want a graphics division this rogue? When I was watching and reading about the unapproved press tour that Kadori, Peterson, and Shrout went on Twitter and YouTube, I can't help but think that these are the moves of someone trying to save themselves by setting up Intel's higher management for a round of bad PR if they are axed off the division and not let it continue to chase the dream, serve the gamers, and kill the competition, so to speak. So what I will say is it was kind of a last-minute thing for when the sounds of it, and they were like, well, we got to do something this month.
Mm-hmm.
Are they setting it up so that they get a bunch of press out there and people get sad if they try to kill it? I don't know. It is an interesting idea. The only reason I do acknowledge this could be true because this is something that happens in companies all the time. One person goes out there and starts making a big deal about something, so the board has to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, don't you think?
I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. Like, I don't know what else to say. As for another team acquiring them, I do think that's... I guess I just don't know who would want to acquire AXG or what they would acquire them for. I mean, I guess I don't know what you and John Petty talked about there, but...
He talked about, frankly, the people he suggested were like people like Dell or HP to try to use it to make their own small accelerators or something.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, I guess.
I don't really see that happening, though.
I don't see Dell developing their own.
If I'm wrong, I'll be wrong, but it's just my gut goes, yeah.
I would be surprised if Dell started developing their own graphics cards or something, I guess.
I mean, technically they used to, but yeah. I don't know. And according to him, it will definitely not be Apple, which would have been the one I would have expected the most, especially because I think Raj used to work at Apple too. So I don't know. I think they would be most likely to just cut the brand in half and then maybe come back swinging hard eventually after not going out of business.
Yeah, I mean, the only other one is thing I could think of is just one of those like server companies that nobody that actually pays attention to, like desktop actually is aware of, like
or maybe ARM,
like Epic.
But I don't know if they're big enough to buy them. I don't know. Well, let us move on to some more Intel news here. Story number 4, Intel Meteor Lake reportedly delayed until the end of 2023 will have knock-on effects for TSMC. Remember, this is something I've been talking about for a while, that Meteor Lake's coming out later. But so now other people are reporting on it, and then I'm quoting from Tech Power Up. Based on a report from TrendForce, Intel has yet again had to push back its upcoming Meteor Lake CPUs, and it now appears that Intel will only be launching Meteor Lake towards the end of 2023. It's unclear why there has been another delay, but Intel is said to have canceled most of its orders with TSMC for the 3nm GPU that Intel would have made for 2023. The knock-on effect of this, then, is that TSMC is said to be slowing down its production line expansion towards 3nm, as the company is now unsure if it'll be able to fill its order books for 2023. TSMC's main customer for 3nm node is still going to be Apple then, but with the loss of what is likely to be around 6 months worth of production from Intel, TSMC is said to be considering cutting its capex for 2023. TSMC's other customers, such as AMD, MediaTek, and Qualcomm, say they aren't planning to move into 3nm until 2024 for the most part. So unless there's a change in plans from either of these companies, there could be, I would actually say, or increased demand from Apple, TSMC is said to hit the brakes when it comes to starting a new cutting-edge production lines next year. TSMC is also likely to see reduced revenue during 2023 due to Intel's change of plans, although it's too early to make any assumptions. TrendForce also suggests that Intel might still use TSMC's 3nm node as a backup plan if Intel would fail to execute on moving to the Intel 4 process by then. But considering how complex it is to move a design between different foundry processes, that seems unlikely. And also there's rumors coming out right now that Apple is possibly porting one of their designs to 3nm to make use of this. Mm-hmm. So do you have any thoughts on this, Stan?
The thing I would be most concerned about, because like with Intel, with Meteor Lake coming out at the end of 2023, like just from a release timeline, that doesn't seem that off to me if Raptor Lake isn't going to be coming out until, probably early next year. Like when else would it come out? I mean, Meteor Lake would then have to come out, 3-4 months after Raptor Lake or something crazy like that?
Which isn't it, 3-4 months after Raptor Lake?
Yeah.
No, late 2023.
No, I'm saying if it wasn't pushed to, late 2023. I mean,
that was the plan, yeah. I mean, if you remember, mobile Meteor Lake was supposed to launch first half of next year. So not 3 months, but maybe 6 months after mobile Raptor Lake, which has happened before. And then the desktop one was supposed to be Q3 or mid next year. Now it seems like it's end of next year, like December for desktop Meteor Lake and Q3 for laptop, meaning Phoenix just has carte blanche to raffle stomp around for half a year.
The one thing I'm more worried about beyond just Intel faltering on deadlines again is if this will have is the downstream effects this will have if TSMC isn't able to keep up. Isn't able to, but doesn't ramp up manufacturing of 3 nanometer. If this will artificially possibly create another slowdown in manufacturing overall,
Absolutely. And honestly, the biggest thing I want to point out on this is I forgot how long ago it was, maybe a month ago or something. There was something going on with Pat Gelsinger flying to TSMC to discuss getting more capacity from them because they needed it. And then a month later, they pushed back Meteor Lake, supposedly. How pissed do you think TSMC is?
I'm sure they're not happy.
And so all I can say is we're in a recession. Hopefully it doesn't last for, over a year, but this is going to be a more down year coming up now, or it's not going to be as crazy as last year. I think we can at least agree. No matter what happens with this recession, 2024 is going to be more down than 2021 was. Okay. This is something TSMC is not going to forget. In another market, I'm sure other people would have bought this up, but they moved some stuff around for Intel, and now it's in a down year. That next time Intel comes in and says, hey, we need to make Celestial on 2 nanometer, they might be like, yeah, get bent.
Yeah,
go to your own foundry. You guys completely fucked us.
Yeah, and it seems like Apple is always able to utilize their newest node, so hopefully Apple can move something onto TSMC 3 nanometer. But
I would also remind people that Zen 5 is on 3 and 4 nanometer, but it's on AMD's roadmap officially, guys. So as much as Zen 5 seems to be an early 2024 thing now, they were trying to get it out late 2023, and Nvidia's moved designs to a different node in under a year and launched it with Maxwell, which again, John Petty says and Daniel Nenny say that's the most insane thing they've ever seen actually pulled off, is porting an entire architecture from 20 to 28 nanometer in under a year and launching it with drivers. Who is to say if RDNA 3 doesn't blow Nvidia away, but, and then Nvidia's like, crap, RDNA 4 is going to be even better. We need to get Blackwell out with as many advantages as possible. That's something Nvidia will be thinking about with TSMC's 3 nanometer. It's something AMD will be thinking about with 3 nanometer for Zen 5. What I'm saying is the reason Nvidia might not be planning to use TSMC's 3 nanometer right away, the reason AMD is making Zen 5 for both 3 and 4 nanometer is because they're not sure it'll be ready before the end of next year. But this decision could be made 12 months out if they rushed. So I'd say they have like another quarter to decide if they want to port things or go with 3 nanometer designs they have. And for all we know, in 4 months, we'll hear TSMC's 3 nanometer is back on track and ahead of schedule again. And then you could see Nvidia and AMD jump in and say, we're going to use it for Blackwell and Zen 5. But that's the only thing I'd throw out there. And they're not giving it back to Intel if that happens.
Yeah.
Which if that happens, no backup node for Intel 4. Hope it goes on track, Intel. J. Matty, Ice, and Chunky both write in. I combined their questions. He says, hi, Dom and Tan. That's how he said our names. First of all, thank you for the AMD release roundup. Have you leaked an approximate release date for Zen 4 Mobile? If not, can you now? Also, have you heard anything about AMD focusing on the supply of their laptop chips? Chunky's a new patron, so his part of it, I think he started actually by saying, sorry if you already answered this. Well, we have. AMD's focusing hard on laptop supply next year compared to previous generations. And in terms of when will Zen 4 Mobile launch? When did Renoir launch? When did Cezanne launch? I don't think you need a source to know. Phoenix is probably going to launch CES next year, beginning of next year, Maverick writes in. He says, hey, Tom and Dan, with Intel Arc again falling way behind initial and even remapped timelines, why is Intel struggling so much since basically forever to meet any real goals? 14 to 10 nanometer, for example. And while AMD makes it their fair share of mistakes and poor messaging every now and then, is able to meet or exceed nearly every goal and expectation since N1 and hit most target dates without promised windows pretty much every time. Thanks in advance. P.S. It seems like Intel's perpetually doing what Steve from Gamers Nexus made an entire video on, and he puts this in quotes, Intel won't stop talking about AMD, new Tiger Lakes. Yeah, I remember that when he was just like, it seems like Intel's business is talking about how things they'll have in 3 years will beat what AMD has now.
Yeah.
Which I agree with Steve on that. I think we've talked about it enough, frankly. I mean, it's execution, it's management, and it's trying to do too much, you know? Think about what it takes to make a product like Navi 31 with 2 different types of dies on 2 different nodes. It's only that's it, and then they 3D stack some cache. Like they had to execute on Epic multiple times with multiple types of dies on nodes before they got everything down where they're sure they could be confident they could do this on time.
Yeah.
Intel's like Ponte Vecchio 47, 3 different nodes, 47 chips, 3 different nodes. Are you fucking nuts?
47 chips, 3 different nodes, 0 lease.
Yeah, like we've never. It's like, what is it? I saw someone in the Moore's Law said Discord, I think, say it's like their swimming practices jumping in the Atlantic Ocean during a thunderstorm. Whereas AMD went from a swimming pool to a river to a lake to an ocean.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it is. Intel thought they could do everything at once because they thought they would always have unlimited money, and they don't, it turns out. QH Freddy writes in, he says, it seems like we're back in an i5 is enough for gaming era once again. With even the i3s posting good performance in gaming right now, do you think the current ones will age better than the 4-core, 4-thread ones of the last decade? Will it be as dramatic as how quickly those became inadequate? Well, the i5s lasted a very long time at first. You know, it's a moving target. Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge. I would even say Broadwell. Well, Haswell is when it started to show its age. And remember, it didn't even start with Sandy Bridge. There was Nehalem, you know, right, with quad-core i5s. So we're talking about like 5 years of the quad-core i5 dominance before Haswell was getting, you know, curb stomped by Battlefield 4 multiplayer. So do I think these i5s will age well? It's hard to say. The only thing...
Because there's 6 cores right now, right? Or 6 big cores, right?
6 big cores, 4 little cores for the K, 6 cores, no little cores for the non-K, and Raptor Lake should be 6 plus 4 for everything, 6 plus 8 for the K.
I think, you know, I think 6 cores with hyperthreading, I think will work well for a long time. I guess I'm not sure if that will eventually be an issue where you'll really want to have 16 threads in the next couple years, because I don't know, maybe that could be an issue like 2-3 years down the line, where I think right now i5s are certainly enough for gaming, but if you can get an i7, I think I would find that preferable.
Yeah, and it's just the only thing that makes me wonder at all if these i5s will last as long as before, which again, they didn't last forever. It was like, if you go from Nehalem specifically and Sandy Bridge, I mean, where do you want to do the starting point? I'd say they lasted about 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
They didn't last like 6 years from even Sandy Bridge to where some games like, again, Battlefield multiplayer were making it really hard on them. The only thing that makes me pause is it's starting to make the rounds now that the Spider-Man Remastered on PC runs really well. Really good porting job by Nixus that Sony bought just for porting their games to PC. So it looks like that was worth buying that studio. But it has a ton of CPU users. The 5800X3D is at 100% usage while playing it, which you can still play 4K 100, but it's like chugging. And the reason is it streams in data like on PS5. Not as much, but it still uses it, and it's constantly swapping data in and out, loading up the cores. It's the only thing I'd worry about.
Yeah.
With the i5. Do I think it's going to last as long? Probably, but remember, as long was like 3 to 5 years, not 7 or something, you know, because I think by the end of this console gen, you're going to want something stronger. But remember, no matter the amount of cores, I'd say as long as you have 8 threads, it's about performance. The current Alder Lake i3s outperform the 8700K despite having 4 less threads. It doesn't matter. So if Intel were to launch a 10 gigahertz quad core with 8 threads next year, I would say that's probably going to outperform that Alder Lake i5 for a long time. It's not going to be like, oh, it can't run on only 8 threads because it's at 10 gigahertz. Yeah, it can. It's just so IPC clock speeds, that changes the balance, but it is a moving target too. you can see, my dog Reese here has a schedule that's almost as busy as mine when we're at the office during a workday. And because of this, we're both always looking for an efficient lunch that we can make quickly that's also very healthy. And we've solved the problem with Vite Ramen, who's a sponsor of this piece of content. Vite Ramen is an eager American company that's crafted a protein and nutrient-dense meal that takes minutes to make without sacrificing taste. This includes their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice while cooking, or their new Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy, microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break. Click on the link in the description and use the offer code BROKENSILICON to save 10% on a variety of different products, including special bundles for Moore's Law's Dead fans, raw nudes if you want to make up your own recipe, Vite Go packages, and other food products and cooking utensils, and more. Whatever you prefer, using these offer codes helps support this channel tremendously, and it gets you a good deal for a healthy, fast, and tasty, reliable sponsor of Moore's Law's Dead. Try Vite Ramen today. Let us move on then to, we'll put down the timestamp, to story number 5. Ryzen Threadripper Pro 5995WX released to do-it-yourself and reviewed. And I've got quite a write-up here from both Tech Power Up, and then I will go into the Tech Spot review from Steve at Hardware Unboxed. Tech Power Up says, the 5000 series processors have been available since March in Lenovo systems. However, today the do-it-yourself channel is equipped with these monstrous CPUs as well. With up to 64 cores, 128 threads, Zen 3 architecture finally in the do-it-yourself market for Threadripper, these processors can boost up to 4.5 gigahertz and have 128 PCIe 4.0 lanes and 8-channel DDR4 integrated memory controller with a 280-watt TDP across all models. The top-end Threadripper Pro 5995WX is a monstrous 64-core, with a base frequency of 2.7 gigahertz boosted to 4.5 gigahertz, 256 megabytes of L3 cache, but it costs a staggering $6,500. Additionally, all new Ryzen Threadripper Pro 5000 series CPUs do require a WRX 80 base motherboard chipset, and many of them are now getting updates in the BIOS to support overclocking for the do-it-yourself market. From Steve at Hardware Unboxed, he says, the Threadripper Pro 595WX is an impressive processor, and although for the majority of our testing it wasn't a great deal faster than the 399DX, it can be around 30% faster depending on the workload. However, even that percentage, 30% gain on average, can be fairly meaningless in a workstation setting. So here's what actually happened to ours. The Threadripper 3000 Zen 2 series processors we used to be using at Hardware Unboxed were previously had no issues with 4K 60 footage. When we upgraded to a GH6, we wanted to start working with 5.7K 60 footage that we would edit down into 4K, and this proved troublesome for the Zen 2 Threadrippers. In short, the 5995WX's name is a game changer for our workflow. As such, it's difficult to put it into context of percentage gains. It's not just faster, it's wildly more practical. Like he said, there were some situations where it went from chugging to just editing thousands of things at once.
No, yeah, and I think anyone can relate to that to an extent, not even if they're working with these workloads, but like...
Most of the time you won't, though, but sometimes you will.
Or when you... Or, I mean, like, even just having a computer that's, like, a little bit deficient in RAM or core count, sometimes, like, it goes from working perfectly fine to just chugging along and taking, 2 minutes to open a file or some shit like that.
Yeah, and so because this helped him so much, he says, we'd say we could easily justify spending $3,300 on like a 5975WX plus everything else you need to build the workstation PC, as it would pay itself off both in terms of productivity and just mental health. On that note, it's difficult to give something like the 5995WX a value rating. If it can do for you what it can do for us, then it's invaluable and will pay for itself. It's a workstation product designed for professionals with no real competition from Intel. It's your best option. We're happy AMD is giving customers the chance to build their own workstation PCs with this and not forcing them to buy a mediocre OEM system now. So that in and of itself is a win. We look forward to putting the Threadripper Pro 5995WX through its paces over the coming months and years. And we hope we can take a look at the 5975WX soon as well and get a feel for if that model is better suited to our use cases. And so I thought this was interesting because to me, this kind of seems like AMD is launching this in case Intel launches Sapphire Rapids or Fishhawk Falls. HEDT systems this year, which I haven't been told they're canceled, but why am I not hearing more about them, Intel? And I can't confirm if the bugs that are rumored to be in Sapphire Rapids also apply to the 24-core monolithic Fishhawk Falls, but some of them probably do.
Well, and just like they say, there's really nothing on the market that occupies this niche right now. So why not capitalize off it and sell a processor for $6,500?
Right, and it's $6,500 for the 64 core. It says $3,300 for the was that the 24 or 32 core? I forgot which one it was. There's nothing stopping them from then launching like a $1,500 24 core if they need to and undercutting Fishhawk Falls. And that's what I think they've set themselves up for, is if they need to, they can drop a 24 or 16 core for this workstation and basically beat it. And you know what? They could drop it with a couple of Vcache versions as well if they wanted to.
Well, yeah, and just that 24 core though, just with that IO you can get with that, that's still unparalleled. And it's 8-channel, right?
Yeah, which I think Fishhawk Falls is 4-channel and it's PCIe 5.0. I think 64 PCIe lanes, but this is 128 of 4.0, double the memory channels, way more capacity for RAM. No one's buying Fishhawk Falls for the single core performance, so who cares if it were going to beat Zen 3 by like 10-20%. And keep in mind that Intel is not as efficient at high threaded workloads. So
yeah,
there's a chance that 24 core would use 280 watts, just like this uses 280 watts. And in mid threaded workloads, it might not even be much better than the Zen 3 one because it boosts higher. The all core might actually boost higher. I know, guys. Alder Lake can boost 8 cores above 5 gigahertz. Guess what? Can it boost 24 cores above 5 gigahertz at the same time without using 500 watts? I'm skeptical.
Probably.
There'd be a downfall of a monolithic design, whereas AMD can go, all 24 cores of our, whatever it would be called, like 5965X, I think. All 24 of them, they're all hitting, like 4 gigahertz or something, whereas yours struggling to hit 24 at 4 gigahertz. So, yeah, I think this was a preemptive launch from AMD. I don't think I have anything else to say about it, though.
No.
All right. Let us then move on to story number 6. Preliminary specs and pricing for Zen 4 leaked. WCCF Tech recently reported that they had received confirmation from their own sources as the following initial SKUs for Zen 4 Raphael's release. According to WCCF Tech, they say the 7950X from Zen 4 will be 16 cores, boost to 5.7 gigahertz, and cost $800 or more. That the 7900X will be 12 cores, 5.6 gigahertz boost, $600 or more. And that the 7700X will be 8 cores, 5.4 gigahertz, $300. The 7600X 6 cores, 5.3 gigahertz, $230 or higher in pricing. They also claim that you can't overclock the Ryzen 7000 SKUs from this source, which this writer thinks is odd considering AMD's own motherboard partners are already advertising extreme overclocking on the motherboards. That just applies to RAM. That would be bizarre. But what else can this writer confirm about this? Well, I already know, and Angstronomics has also leaked, that there are 5.8 gigahertz Zen 4 engineering samples out there. 2 people, me and him saying this. So I don't know if they can get that in a final SKU, but I do know they have hit that in the labs. Also, I have sent this list from WCCF Tech to a couple of sources, and what they told me, and again, AMD contacts rarely tell me everything. They said it's close, but there's some differences. So, and also I was told that AMD had not decided final clock speeds or pricing as of the time of this article, that the way they market it might change. Remember with Zen 2, I think they advertised up to 4.7 gigahertz. It almost never hit it, and so they felt bad. Zen 3 actually does hit 5 gigahertz sometimes, but they advertise it as 4.9 to play it safe. So AMD isn't quite sure what they're going to claim yet. There's a chance they may advertise 5.7 and actually hits 5.9 sometimes. And there's a chance that they might just say, no, it's 5.8 or 5.9 or something. So I would say that I wouldn't take these numbers to the bank, but I do think they're close enough, and I have been told they're somewhat close, that I think we can start talking about this, though. Like, what do you think? I mean, we've been saying if AMD wants to, they can make the 7700X 8 cores and $300, and that will compete with the i5, I think.
It's interesting. If this is all correct, it seems like they're kind of taking a diverging strategy a little bit from their old stuff, where the 7950X launched for $750, correct? misremembering that.
The 5950X?
Yeah. Yes.
No, launched for
It
800.
did? Okay.
Zen 2 was 750.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So, actually, never mind. This is all around, I guess, kind of good. They're not getting too crazy where a bunch of people were pissed off when or some people were pissed off with Zen 3, it seemed like, because they pretty much across the board really upped prices by $50. And, at the mid-range, I don't think they can really do that again or keep with that status quo with how well Alder Lake's performed. But I guess their bet is still, well, if you want 16 cores, this is what you have.
Yeah, well, and I do find the higher pricing at the top end there a little higher than I would have expected. The pricing for the 8 and the 6 core seems totally realistic to me. I feel like, though, charging twice as much for 4 more cores, it just seems like they would go for $500 to me. It seems odd that they would charge 600, and for the 7950X, I would imagine they might charge 700 then, 50% more or 40% more for, 33% more cores, and then leave the $800 spot for the 7950X3D that I know is coming out probably within 6 months.
Yeah, and, hopefully these prices are a bit off, and that's what ends up happening, because you're right, it is a bit weird pulling the prices of the 8-core down, although I guess they're calling it the 7700X this time, which my bet is the 7800X will be the 3D cache version of it, but...
But if this is what it ends up being, Intel, we all know what Raptor Lake's going to be. I think this is AMD. If they do this, it's because they think the Raptor Lake i5 with 6 big cores and 8 little cores, they think that'll be like $350. And so they're like, whatever, we can afford to charge a little less for a little less multi-threading, same single threading.
Yeah.
And then if the 7900X is 12 cores, to me that tells me they expect the Raptor Lake i7, which is basically going to be the current i9 plus 15% performance. They think, well, this is going to beat Alder Lake, so this is going to tie whatever their they think it'll beat the i7 then or something. Like they're going to charge 600, I think. So I don't think Intel's charging $600 for that i7. I think 450 to 500, and they would not charge 600 unless they just thought this was better. Yeah. There's something we don't know then if they actually charge that much, in my opinion, because there's no reason for them to charge twice as much as the 8-core. They don't need to. It doesn't cost that much more to make.
Unless they're just saying...
Unless they know it's going to win.
Yeah, and they're just saying, hey, we know we can charge $600. Sure, you're not getting twice as many cores for twice as much money, but buy it. Anyways, I guess.
So yeah, I guess let me say this again. This is close. I actually think some of the boost clocks could be a little higher. I've heard a couple of them on one model might be a little lower, but I wouldn't be surprised if actually this boosts a little higher than what WCCF Tech says. But this pricing, if this is what ends up happening, this is the pricing of AMD knowing they're going to win.
Yeah.
This is the pricing of AMD saying we're 800 because your i9's 10% weaker. We're 600 because your i7's 20% weaker. And we price the 7700X and 7600X incredibly aggressively because we need to beat the i5.
Yeah.
And they're leaving an exact in-between point of 450 for something. Wonder what it is. Maybe a 7800X 3D? The exact same price as the 5800X 3D? I mean, that's what you're seeing here.
Yeah.
All right. CW writes in, hi, Tom and Dan. You both have discussed purchasing used RTX series for prices such as the RTX 3080 or 500, and I agree wholeheartedly. However, do you have any advice for pricing or recommendations for AM4 Zen 3 or Zen 3D CPUs? In your opinion, what would be the next upgrade for 120Hz gaming Zen 2 owners for the best value? I mean, the prices are going down precipitously right now for Zen 3. I don't know if you guys have seen, but the 5950X has been 400 to 450 recently. And so the 12-core Zen 4 is going to be better than that, though. So I think $400, and so that's about the price of a Raptor Lake i7. I think I'd want $350. $350 for the Zen 3 16-core, and $300 at most for this 5800X30. Look, if you bought a 5800X30, it's one of the best CPUs for gaming on the market. Zen 4 wasn't out yet. But in a world where Zen 4 is out, I don't think the 5800X30 is going to be better than the 7700X. No. I think it's going to be comparable. There will be some games where they massively favor the Vcache. Sure. But there will also be there are games where the 5800X30 is only like 5-10% better. than
Yeah,
the 5800X. So
but by the time the Sony 700 is out, if you're going to be looking for like Zen 3 CPUs, I think you would want to get the like in a few months the 5800X 3D might be more like a, I don't know, $250 CPU or something like that.
and right, so that's what
that's what you should want to pay for it, is what I mean. I guess I don't know what it will be on Amazon, but
and so I would say the 5950X is a tricky one because it's going to, of course, beat the 7700X in multi-threading.
yeah.
But at the same time, it actually lacks AVX 512. And it also will lose in single threading by probably 20 to 30%. So no, I mean, I think the 5950X 400 or less, and you better want the multi-threading for some reason. And the 5800X 3D, think of it as a 7700X that's not as efficient probably, and doesn't use the newer platform.
Mm-hmm.
Now maybe that's good for you though. Okay, but it's still like worse. Like I would still say you would want to pay less than the 7700X for a 5800X 3D.
Yeah.
Spamtham Neo writes in, and he says, for a hypothetical 7950X 3D, would it make sense if they had one 3D chiplet and one standard chiplet? You get the benefit of the 3D Vcache chiplet without losing multi-threading performance. Okay, so I actually like this question here because I reached out to someone at AMD about this. Like I do this, guys. I see these questions ahead of time, and I like maybe the day before we record, I like send a couple to people at AMD, Intel, or Nvidia, and I'm like, this makes sense. And we actually talked it out. So the short answer is, well, yeah, AMD could do this. Windows 10, Windows 11 especially, can schedule Alder Lake between big little cores and the second thread on a big core. So, of course, if they want to, they could delineate between the Vcache core and the non-Vcache core. However, why do that? Is what we came to the conclusion of. Why? Why hire tons of people to write these drivers to work on this when instead you can charge an extra $50 or $100 to have them all Vcache? What are you really saving?
You're basically getting 2 8 cores or something. I mean, I don't know how to answer that. Just yeah, AMD would probably prefer to just charge you $50 more though.
I mean, it's like you're asking, because this is going to be a Halo product.
Yeah.
So the people who want it is like, what's the question? Is it going to be like we're going to have like a $900 all Vcache and an $800 half Vcache? Who's the person that says, I only want half Vcache? No, AMD's just going to be like, we're going to make this a more elegant solution where there's zero chance it's scheduled wrong, and we don't have to spend money programming that, and then we're just going to charge an extra $50 or something. Like, that's what I think they do. Okay, well, that's all of the stories. Then let us get into the final wrap-up. These are the stories that didn't deserve getting their own story, but they definitely deserve a mention. So let me see here. Where do I even start with these? There's a couple interesting ones. Let me see. Where is this one? Yeah, so someone got a hold of an RTX 2000 series card that was branded GTX 2080, suggesting that at least at first NVIDIA was considering calling it the GTX 2000 series. Which I guess there's always been rumors of that, but I don't remember those rumors. Of course, when Turing came out, that would have been before or right when I was starting Moore's Law is Dead, so I may have not paid as much attention back then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess this is like these companies need to revamp their branding every, I don't know, half decade to decade, and they're like, well, we need the RTX.
We need that ray tracing, baby. I want that ray tracing.
It doesn't surprise me that the early models would have started out as GTX, and then someone said, well, what if we update the branding again? Because before GTX, it was just GT, correct?
Yes.
So,
and I think they delineated GT, GTX. Now they just delineate GTX, RTX.
Yeah.
I will also say this. Keep in mind, this looks to be an early test prototype for the 2080.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this isn't like software. It takes months to call up suppliers, make a mold, make a prototype. I think it's
that's
entirely conceivable. And Nvidia was working on this, ordered the prototype. By the time they ordered the prototype, they already knew it was going to be called RTX. But why tell them so it leaks out?
Yeah.
That was kind of a big surprise. So I think it's entirely conceivable as well. In the contract, they were just like, hey, can you make it so that we could change what's on the side of the card in words if we needed to last minute? And they're like, yeah, sure. We'll just charge you an extra, whatever amount of money, and you can change the typeface to whatever you want on any card. Yeah, because we might need that to have a GeForce card and a Titan. But make sure each letter on the typeface can be changed. And then they're like, surprise, it's RTX. We just didn't want it to leak.
Mm-hmm.
This type of stuff happens all the time, like that engineering sample for a 4090 Ti. I mean, maybe they have another cooler in design, but all the test samples being sent out right now use the old design because they don't want it to leak out again, So that's the only thing I would say there. This doesn't necessarily prove it, though, I guess is all I'm saying. Let me see here. Igor confirms a 2023 launch date for Sapphire Rapids. I really don't have anything to say about that. Been talking about it for a while now. Hey, Dan, you can get a liquid cooling water block for the A380 if you want to overclock your A380 to 92 watts.
And still have a fan cooler that could probably cool that anyways, but
yeah,
whatever.
Intel unveiled their professional graphics card for workstation, Dan.
Oh.
With, do they even say? They basically gave you the specs. With no information on launch date.
Oh, well, that's pretty usable then, and I'm excited to get that, Tom.
I know. It's just... oh, my God. It's like when... I will say this, guys. From what I'm hearing, the briefing for high-end professional cards for Alchemist is supposed to happen within a month for some of my contacts. And, I mean, as far as I know... they don't think professional Alchemist actually comes out, at least with the high-end models, till early next year. So I don't know why they showed this off. It's not ready.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have here in the wrap-up? Raptor Lake gets deleted. Look at that, Dan. Still like smaller than Rocket Lake.
Rocket Lake was a big boy, Tom.
Yeah.
Big boy that did nothing well.
Yep. Well, he used a lot of energy successfully. And then we have Qualcomm and Global Foundries sign an agreement to double chip manufacturing in the U.S. I just think this is worth reporting on how many companies are moving their stuff over to the U.S. for manufacturing.
Got to chase those subsidies.
Gotta chase those subsidies, baby. And, there's the worry of like a world war in the Southeast Asia. So, maybe that could cause some problems for them. So I don't know what this is about here. Yeah. So Intel started talking about the support for multi-GPU, like Crossfire and SLI for Alchemist. I don't know. I would hate to see what the frame pacing is for Alchemist. Raja, don't do this. Don't do what you did with the 480, where you're like three 480s beat a 1080. Don't come out and say 3 A70s beat a 4090. Or like, if you get 4 A770s, you can beat a 4090. Don't do it.
And your frame times you'll jump between 16 frames per second and 180 frames per second. It'll be great.
Yeah, and you'll need to buy a Threadripper motherboard just to support it. It's time to stop. Just stop. That's not going to save it. And, we've already talked about this one as well. All right, so yeah, that's the wrap-up. Let us get into the final reader mail. Timo writes in, and he says, hi, Tom, and possibly Dan. Well, definitely Dan. Lot of Intel news these past couple weeks, but one aspect is missing for me. Was Intel's crypto ASIC ventures successful or not? They launched at least one Bitcoin ASIC chip earlier this year. So far, Bitcoin mining isn't dead either and has no signs of being dead, so someone might buy those. Is this a competitive chip? So this is something I actually looked into when I saw this. Intel has a block scale ASIC, as they call it.
How does it... I know nothing about them. How do they compare to Bitmain, I guess?
They seem to have launched on time earlier this year, like a couple months ago, and they seem to be better.
Well, and I would bet that Intel would have the added advantage over Bitmain that it's not half a scam. So
Yes.
I'm saying I doubt Intel would be a half scam like Bitmain is, where Bitmain just sells off their old crap that they're no longer using to people.
Yeah, I don't know if they do that anymore, but
Maybe they don't.
it was a well-known thing that if you get a Bitmain ASIC in the early days, it's just going to be covered in dust and was mining. They use the newest chips to mine for like 6 to 12 months, and then they start developing the next one and using those to mine to make money off of it. And
then they sell their old ones off.
Which they say is long-term stability testing is what they're doing.
They're long-term stability testing and making billions of dollars in the meantime by doing it.
Yeah, and there were worse ones, though. I forgot, was it Butterfly Labs, I think, was a crazy notorious for sending you half-working dusty cards that they developed.
I don't remember them at all.
And maybe BitFury. There's worse ones than Bitmain. But yeah, my understanding is, Timo, these Intel mining ASICs for Bitcoin, they work. They came out on time. Not much to say. But they only seem to have sold them directly to some big firms. Like, I don't think you can buy them on the market. I don't know, whatever man writes in again. He says, Hola, Thomas and Daniel. As someone who knows nothing about mining crypto, I wanted to ask you guys, how decent might Alchemist cards be for mining? In my opinion, Alchemist GPUs could wind up being the best cards to get for someone who wants a few cards to start up his own rig, since it is undesirable by both gamers and creators, which will likely keep it dirt cheap until the next crypto boom. Presumably there will be one, and that will still be GPUs that do the mining, I'm assuming. We'll see if Ethereum gets to proof of stake. There's supposedly they're going to do it this year, Dan.
Oh boy.
It sounds like you don't necessarily believe it.
No.
To be honest, I kind of do believe they're going to at least try to. I'll say this. I do think they're going to try to. We'll see if they're successful. And they don't just blow up their entire blockchain. But so think about that, though. I don't know, whatever, man. If they move to proof of stake, there will be other coins you can mine, but that is going to disrupt the market a bit for what you can mine. Additionally, honestly, when it comes to mining, it just seems to come down to teraflops and bandwidth. Straight up. The 6800 XT has about the same amount of teraflops as a 3070 overclocked. Overclocked 3070 seems to perform like 6800 XT. And yeah, because I'm trying to think of like, too, with bandwidth, and so it's both. Yeah. And I would expect the A750, or should I say A770, to be about as good as a 3070 or a 3060 Ti, but I don't see why they would be any better. It's a similar amount of teraflops to a 3070.
Yeah, it's hard to say because we don't know the official specs for anything either. So it's like, it's
true.
Hard to
We
guess
don't even know what it's going to clock to at the end of the day. But I mean, I think if you overclock an Alchemist card, what we're going to find is they hit about like 23, 22 teraflops or something, which is, it's 3070 territory. So I don't know why we would assume it's any better at all, actually. TMC Payton writes in, he says, howdy, any outlook on the mining performance of RDNA 3 GPUs? The decreased bandwidth from GDR6 compensated by Infinity Cache made RDNA 2 pretty poor for mining. RDNA 3 seems to go deeper down that route. Maybe a talented programmer could better utilize Infinity Cache for mining this time? No, I think RDNA 3 is going to be directly better at mining than RDNA 2.
I mean, you might get a situation where you have double the compute and 50% more bandwidth or something. Yeah.
I mean, it's over double the compute, and maybe not double gaming performance, but over double the teraflops. And guys, 50% bigger bus, and now they're supposedly going to, I think, 20 or 21 gigabit per second.
Oh yeah, so more than 50% more bandwidth.
You scared me there, John. Jesus.
It'll probably be like 70% more bandwidth.
So no, I think a 7900 XT is going to be able to do maybe 120 mega hash or more while using less energy. So I don't know that it's just a balance. It always is a balance of teraflops and bandwidth, right? Like Titan Volta, I'm trying to think what that got to in bandwidth. I want to say it was like 700 gigabytes per second. Didn't really mine any better, though, than the 3080, which had a ton of teraflops. So it's just going to, then the Radeon 7 had over double the teraflops of Vega 64, but it only had, to my memory, like 40%, 30% more teraflops, but it over doubled bandwidth. So it's a balance. It depends both. It seems to be mostly be about bandwidth. And this time, AMD's going with less Infinity Cache and more bandwidth. So will it be as good at Lovelace at mining? I doubt. But it will probably be more efficient than Ampere. So, let me see. Intet Yeah, Intet writes in. He says, do you have any word on the physical length of the average 4090? Will we have to buy a new case because of another length increase, or will it stay around the current high-end standard of 33 centimeters? I don't think they plan to make it much longer, but I don't know. And it's not like I pulled all AIBs.
Yeah.
Just look at the power usage. The 4090 is the spiritual successor to the 3090 Ti. It's going to be about that big.
You can't make a card much bigger than the 3090 Ti. So,
well,
if you want to actually be able to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be 3 slots for the 4090, but I have heard, again, that I think the 4090 Ti, if it's 600 watts, it's going to be like 3.5 slots. Like what I leaked.
Yeah.
A little more than 3. Yeah. I don't know, whatever man writes in again. God, you were just carpet bombing us today. Whatever, man. He says, so when do you guys reckon the PS5 will finally become readily available at MSRP? Here in Europe, it's still hard to find, and it still seems to be getting price gouged, whilst the Series X has finally stopped being overpriced everywhere and you can easily get it. I mean, look, now, I'm sorry, like I just got told the other day that at the PS5 direct sales portal, it was in stock for 2 hours.
Mm.
I don't know what to say. Now, that may have been in the US. I don't remember which region that was for, but I don't know what to say, guys. Like,
most people I know that want a PS5 got one at this point.
It's starting to become... I don't want to minimize the troubles some people have, but it's starting to become hard for me to believe you can't get one. Like, I got 2 in the first month.
Like a guy I know...
I could have gotten one last week. It was in stock for 2 hours.
Like a guy I know in school, I think, has gotten 3 PS5s at this point.
Yeah. So it's not easy, and this is where people go, when can I walk into a Best Buy and get one? Who walks into Best Buys anymore? I don't know.
And I don't know how much Sony is even relying on that with selling these. I don't think they're doing...
I don't know how much they care about selling it to Best Buy anymore.
Yeah.
So when can you get a PS5? Now. Just try to get it. I know, like, I don't know what else to say. And other things go out of stock all the time still. I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to continue to get a little bit easier every week now. But if you really want one, just pay attention to when the drops are. We don't know anyone who hasn't gotten one yet who actually has been trying. That's all I can say. I understand there's undoubtedly going to be some people in the comments, well, you don't know how hard it is. I got 2 the first month. Everyone we know got one. And I know, including Gerard in Spain. Oh. And he got one last year. He said he had to try, but he got one. He didn't pay any scalper prices. So it's not, I don't think it's impossible anymore, guys. I have to tell you. Timo writes in, he says, hi, Tom and Dan. Now that Tom is happy with his Turbo 3090, and Dan, as far as I know, still has a 6700 XT, is there any games coming in the next 6 to 9 months that seem to make your cards not run enthusiast level smoother for 4K monitor that you consider an upgrade? Isn't gaming going like that? Newer games gradually push demands on devs learn more features and availability. Yeah, blah. So, is there anything you're worried about running in 4K? I think you'd be more likely to want an upgrade than me. I kind of got... if you ask what I did, I paid $200 to get 4070 performance early with double the RAM.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not exactly looking to upgrade right now. I mean, if a good card comes along for a good price, I get it. That's kind of how I've always operated. I'm never like, I need to get a card this year, usually. It's just like, I guess I'll get one because I can. That's usually how I buy cards.
Yeah, so, I mean, but look, if I get an opportunity to get a 4070 for $600, it ends up being way better than my 3090 by like 30%, let's say, which is possible for sure. And then I find that I can sell the 3090 because some creators need the extra RAM. I can sell it for the same price. I'll swap it out. Did the same thing. Swapped out Radeon 7 for a 3070 because I was able to sell the Radeon 7 for way more than a 3070 during the mining boom. I'll do it again, but that's why I'll do it. I have no issue running games.
And I guess we'll see how all of the cards shake out. I mean, I don't think I would get anything stronger than a 4070, but we'll see.
I mean, Dan, look, there it is. There's 3090. You haven't even come upstairs yet since you got here.
Yeah, I know.
It's right there.
Yeah.
You fucking peasant.
Yeah, I know.
Get on my level, Dan.
Okay.
Actually, I should probably sell it and get a 3090 Ti. Now I'm a peasant.
Yeah.
Or 6950 XT.
Might want to get two 3090 Ti's just
No,
to
you
be
get
sure.
two 3090 Ti's and a 64-core Threadripper to make sure I'm the coolest guy. Because that's what that would mean, right? I'm cool.
Yeah.
That'd make me cool.
Yeah.
That'd get me the ladies.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Broken Silicon. Remember, tell your friends about us. Subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead. Ring the bell button. Give us a thumbs up. Even though you can't see the thumbs down anymore, the thumbs up still helps the algorithms to do that. And if you have the extra money, support us on Patreon. You get this episode early, ad-free. You get Die Shrink. One just came out. Only for patrons that never has ads. There was a fun one where I what did I look into? Like VRAM pricing this year, and a couple of other things. All that stuff's out there. We can't do this without our patrons. If you need, something our sponsors are selling, try to get it from our sponsors and use the offer code that helps us. And otherwise, have a good summer, everybody. Keep touching those pixels, baby.
Maybe.
Not a fan of that. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foal, AV, Anthony Gareffa, Greg Pataki, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Brett Jones, Aaron Close, Little Germany, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, Ivan K., Brian Riggleman, Dr. Foreman, Sam Miller, Deke, Thomas Rupp, Mechanical Philosopher, Terrence Harrod, SNES Chalmers, Tom Bailey, Greg T. Wanchik, Andrew S., Frank Zielinski, Daniel D., MJB1, Eric Jackson, Justice Brennan, Sammy Good, Valco Malev, The Boss Haas, Nicholas Buckner, Spamton G. Spamton, Jonathan, Lord Starscream, General Drips, Blake, Franco Frederic, Matthew Lazier, Jensen Wang, Nathan Mose, Aziris, Gregory Ecker, Dominique Koch, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Cameron, Caillou Markelli, Hardforum.com, Original Ross, Licky Stefan, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Christopher A. Butler, Jeezy Ziggy, Sarcastro, thanks for the package, Stefan Hart, Jason B., Meat and Pork Stew, Tim Robb, Luis Correa, Ian Clifford, Jesse Jaskowiak, Travis Gooding, Holden Mobley, Nanian, Chris Rich, Deepest Learners, Mad Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Chuck Glidden, Sammy Malas, Greg, Trini, Patrick Groh, Amiral Chief, Brett Summers, Denny Nguyen, Stephen Dick, Tommy Kunden, Brocha, Mark Mitchell, Mac Daffy, Dalmain Peterson, James Anderson, Y. Trui, Mark Raidmaker, Dave Schultz, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Narithio, Matthew Landabazo, Stefan Koladik, Enri Zhang, Judson N., Brendan O'Connell, The Grid, Michelle Pell, D31337 Antics, Jason Bowen, Noah Nicoella, Hexapuma, Chrysantine, Jerome Ferreira, Zaid Beto 3D Sis, Thomas A. Teef, Klein, Britannian, DNA Tech, 50C Desert, Jean O'Shea, Royce Meyer, Charles Russell, Reginald R.E., Morpheus, Tika Autumn, Jackson Miller, JSMMH, Sandy Garrido Saunderson, David Eastland, Cal, Andre Jacques, Gaiman Since Reagan, Jeff Sadler, Jordan Simkovic, Loophole 35, Winstar, Joker, James I. Ratter, Corey Leonard, Nalima, John Shin, Justin Bussell, Kelvin, Austin Haggerty, Roger Davies, Shea, Julian Leet, Corey Capel, Evan Dingle, C2, and of course thank you to Sahara for the music.